before I make the presentation, I would like to thank the residents and businesses in Thousand Oaks for heeding our pleas and conserving energy over these past few days. As you know, the margin between what was available supply-wise and the demand in the state was very narrow the past few days, and we barely escaped reaching stage 3 emergencies these past few days, and we really want to thank all those who conserved energy these past few days. I'm here this evening to do something that's a great part of my job, the part that I like best, I think. I'm Rudy Gonzalez, Region Manager with Southern California Edison, and I'm here this evening to present a grant to many mansions. Southern California Edison's charitable contributions are focused in supporting the underserved communities in our service territory with an emphasis on literacy. And I've been working with many mansions for the past few years and learning more and more about their programs. And I think much of the community is very aware of what they do in the area of providing affordable housing in the community. But I think what a lot of people aren't aware of are the support services they provide once their residents move into their facilities. And it was one of those particular support programs, their after-school homework literacy program, that caught my eye, and I encouraged them to submit a grant request to Southern California Edison. And I'm here this evening to say that they were successful in receiving their grant, and it's with a great deal of pleasure that I offer this check for $20,000 to Rick Schrader, the Executive Director of Many Mansions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez and Southern California Edison and this City Council. As many of you know, with the opening of Hacienda de Feliz last year, we opened up our third community site that helps run our after-school program. We now have over 300 children living with Many Mansions and probably 150 to 200 people participating in our literacy program. That we work very closely with our staff, volunteers, and the school district to keep the kids on track in school, keep them, as any parent knows, the tremendous burdens of homework, especially for our parents, many coming from 2 jobs, having a second language. So with this support, we're able to maintain this program, and this has been a great a benefit not only to our residents, but I also believe the community as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our second presentation is a proclamation commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Kingsman Shakespeare Festival. The festival is an annual event held in Kingsman Park at California Lutheran University, delighting area families for the past decade. At this time, let me introduce Michael Art, CLU Professor and Artistic Director of the Kingsman Shakespeare Festival Company. Michael? Michael, it's my privilege to present you at this time on your 10th anniversary of this project. It's particularly interesting since I was there with you at the laying of the keel, and to see how successful this has been for so long, but also recognize the phenomenal amount of time, effort, energy, and talent that you personally have put into this and how well it has worked out and evolved over its 10-year run. So the Kingsman Shakespeare Festival has been presenting professional theater productions of the works of William Shakespeare on the lawns of Kingsman Park at California Lutheran University in Thousand Oaks for the past 10 years. And Kingsman Shakespeare Festival has been enjoyed by over 100,000 men, women, and children during those years, and also sponsors a junior apprentice program and Camp Shakespeare for local youth. Kingsman Shakespeare Festival teaches youth to appreciate the works of William Shakespeare, thereby enriching the community and cultural environment of Thousand Oaks. And Kingsman Shakespeare Festival provides exemplary service to our community. Now, therefore, I, Dennis Gillette, Mayor of the City of Thousand Oaks, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby commend Kingsman Shakespeare Festival and congratulate the committee on their 10th anniversary. Congratulations, Michael. Please take a few minutes and tell us a little bit more about it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Council. As the Artistic Director and founding member of the Kingsman Shakespeare Company, I thank you especially for this proclamation. For the past 10 years, as was mentioned, the Kingsman Shakespeare Festival has offered live professional theater productions of the works of William Shakespeare for the entertainment and education of audiences young and old. Thousands of people, including many families, have enjoyed the pleasant Thousand Oaks evenings in the beautiful park on the CLU campus as they watch some of the greatest stories ever told come to life. The Kingsman Shakespeare Company is especially grateful to the city's support from the very first year of the festival. The city's Community Events Endowment Fund grants, the support of Tom Mitzi and the city's Theaters Department, the Arts Commission, and the Thousand Oaks Performing Arts Center Board of Governors have made it possible for the Kingsman Shakespeare Festival to offer professional theater at no cost for those under the age of 18. For many of these young people, the festival is their first exposure to the poetic language and vivid characters of Shakespeare. The festival and our other outreach programs, including the Summer Camp Shakespeare and our annual Shakespeare educational tour to local elementary schools, provide a wonderful introduction to Shakespeare and live theater. This year's festival, which began June 30th with the audience-pleasing and comic A Midsummer Night's Dream, continues on weekend evenings through August 6th, continuing with Shakespeare's tragic tale of jealousy and betrayal, Othello. I invite members of the Council and the citizens of Thousand Oaks to spend a wonderful evening under the stars with the Bard of Avon. For more information, just call us at 493-3455 or visit our website at kingsmanshakespeare.org. Thank you again for this honor and for your years of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and congratulations to you and all of the people that worked so hard to make this a continuing success. Our third presentation is to proclaim the week of August 6th through 12th, 2006, as National Stop on Red Week in Thousand Oaks. Classic Limousine Service has teamed up with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, California Highway Patrol, and Farmers Insurance to increase awareness of the dangers of running red lights. At this time, I'll introduce Jennifer Schaffner from Classic Limousine to accept the proclamation and tell us more about National Stop on Red. Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. My name is Jennifer Schaffner, and I am one of the chauffeurs for Classic Limousine Service. I happened to trip over this campaign on the internet and thought, you know, the wonderful people of Thousand Oaks have already thought far enough in advance that they have those wonderful little cameras above the red lights in town. And there are many cities in our area that are improving their red light viewing just so we can try to help people, encourage them not to run red lights. As the mayor said, this is the 10th year of the campaign. It's sponsored by the National Highway Safety Administration. And Captain Randy Petrus and I have just had a conversation about this, and your chief is on board with it. And one of our insurance providers has very graciously accepted the opportunity to help us. We will have further details available at our news conference that will be held next week. But primarily, Ken Harder, the president of our organization, Harder Transportation, and Jay Buron, the general manager, join me in thanking you for this proclamation, bringing to the people's attention of Thousand Oaks that over 118,000 people are hurt or killed annually by people running red lights. And you've all seen it. I've sat at a red light in Burbank, not in Thousand Oaks, but at Burbank the other day and watched 5 people run the red light after it had turned green, and I was the first one in the line, and I waited patiently rather than just going out. We all know what it looks like. So this is a greater public awareness campaign, and we thank you. I've got some posters that you can post in the police department and out here in the public area that feature various different athletes from the, I think you call them the Anaheim Angels. But just to bring more awareness to the public, they very graciously participated in the program.
Jennifer, thank you. Now, if I may, Let me present this proclamation in honor of National Stop on Red Week. A local coalition of law enforcement officials and Classic Limousine Service have joined forces to educate the public on the dangers of the red light running with National Stop on Red Week. A National Stop on Red Week campaign was started by the Federal Highway Administration in 1995 to bring attention to this serious problem on our roadways, since deaths caused by red light running are increasing at more than 3 times the rate of increase for all other fatal crashes. The City of Thousand Oaks, Ventura County Sheriff, California Highway Patrol, and Farmers Insurance are joining Classic Limousine Service in an effort to implement an awareness campaign for Southern California cities. And during the week of August 6 through 12, 2006, members of the coalition will be celebrating National Stop on Red Week that will help the motoring public be safer on Southern California roadways. Now, therefore, I, Dennis Gillette, Mayor of the City of Thousand Oaks, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim August 6 through 12, 2006 as National Stop on Red Week and urge all residents to observe this important public safety week. Jennifer, thank you, and Classic, very, very much. Let's take her. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll call item 6, public comments. City Clerk, please announce.
This is the time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. All speakers for public hearings shall be called and heard during the public hearing. Pursuant to Council standards of operation, the Mayor may assist any speaker from straying into areas not within the city's jurisdiction. All remarks shall be addressed to the Council as a whole. Remarks directed at a particular council member are not allowed. Under state law, issues discussed under public comments can have no action unless listed on the agenda and may be referred to the city manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. All documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking, allowing dissemination to council and staff. 3 people have presented cards, and pursuant to council direction, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I would ask the speakers when you come forward if you would please state your name and community of residence. Our first speaker is former council member, former mayor, Bob Wilson. Bob, welcome back to the chamber. Followed by Terry Arias.
Last week I came and talked to you a little bit about what we called cave dwellers, which is Citizens Against Virtually Everything. Hard to tell the difference between a cave dweller and no-growth people. But no growth, let me explain what that really means. No growth means no houses will be built, no affordable housing, no senior housing, no improvements to existing housing, no improvements to existing businesses. No increase in the budget, no increase in fire and city protection, fire and police protection. In general, no growth will create an aging city that would resemble some of the cities in the downtown LA area. Whereas slow growth, and I believe that 4 of the 5 council people here are truly slow growth council people, and when you hear what I have to say, you'll understand why. Slow growth was designed by our city founders over 40 years ago.
What's that word? Slow,
intentional, smart growth in our city. 40 years later, our city has 128,000 people. It was designed 40 years ago for 140. It is the slowest growing city in Ventura County. Slow growth will provide the ability of a property owner to build a home on a lot in a tract of homes, that the homes are already there. Slow growth would allow a home to be built there. In the business community, slow growth means that a business could be built on a vacant commercial property with some exceptions. Certain standards would have to be met. location, traffic, noise, pollution, and the need to the community. At no time would slow growth endorse the big box structures of Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depots to be built anywhere other than Windy and the 101 freeway. Slow growth has enabled our city to have 40% of its land mass in open space. There's more open space today than there was 4 years ago. I think that's quite a statement for our city. Slow growth philosophy has provided us with becoming the safest city in the United States. It also has provided us with being one of the most popular and sought-after cities to live in. Slow growth has provided us with enough revenue to balance our budget for the last 40 years. Never in 1 year have we not balanced our budget, and that to me is slow growth, steady, important, functioning for the city. Slow growth has allowed us to invest in the Boys and Girls Club of the Conejo. It allowed us to invest in 3 high schools and a middle school where we built tracks, football fields, gymnasiums, and stadiums. This is money that we generated, extra revenue, we're able to help our city. I think you know where I'm going with this statement. There's an election coming up, and I think the word slow growth should be used properly and not stolen by people who are no growth, are cave dwellers. So thank you for your time.
Terry Arias, followed by Debbie Gregory.
I'm Terry Arias, and I'm here representing the Hospice of the Conejo. And I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for allowing me to speak this evening. As you're probably aware, we have been in the community now for 28 years and have had the continued support of the city of Thousand Oaks. The Hospice of the Conejo has services to our clients who are suffering from terminally ill diseases and their families who have had this services free of charge from the onset. Our offices are located in the under one roof building where we enjoy free rent. Thanks again once to the city of Thousand Oaks. We have programs servicing our community from infancy to 103 years of age. Tonight I brought a brochure on our youth grief support services, and I'll leave those for you. And I also would like to make an exciting announcement that we're also going to be restarting our program at the Teen Center, where a counselor and a youth volunteer will be available once a week. So we're excited about that. But the main reason that I'm here this evening is that I would like to ask your support for our event. It's going to be Las Vegas Cool. It's September 10th. It's going to be at the Oak Shopping Center. This is the second year that we're having it at that venue. And we're going to have Elvis there. And we're going to have gaming, and it's just going to be a wonderful evening, and everything, of course, is for the hospice, benefiting the Hospice of the Conejo. The tickets in advance are $50, and you can go online to www.lasvegascool.org.
Terry, would you like to repeat that again?
The www.lasvegascool.org.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Debbie Gregory, followed by Nick Kidwai.
Good evening. I'm Debbie Gregory. I live in Thousand Oaks. And I'd like to first talk about the grand jury investigation, but first I'd like to address the council's code of ethics. I tried to find it today on the website. I even called someone in the city clerk's office and asked for their help. It's not on there. I guess it's not important. And I'd like you to revise your code of ethics because there's something very important you left out of it. You treat each other with respect. That's important. You treat staff with respect. What about treating the residents that you serve with respect? Somehow that got left off the table. And I think that you should think about it seriously. The council's response to the grand jury report was denial and damage control. It wasn't unexpected. They did not take responsibility for their actions. We asked our children to take responsibility, but our elected officials refused. The majority did not even have the decency to apologize for the horrific actions, including circumventing democracy in Thousand Oaks when Ed Masry's replacement was not elected but chosen by the council majority with a crony. Instead, this council majority accuses the grand jury of making inflammatory comments and basing their conclusions on speculation lacking evidence. The recommendations of the grand jury, and I quote, "The City Council should revise the Code of Ethics to avoid the appearance of Brown Act violations, to ensure the transparent conduct of city business, to address the public perception of favoritism, to deal with the appearance that decisions are often made in advance of council meetings, and to address a perceived lack of objective decision-making." That's a quote. Although the evidence was not found to be significantly clear enough to justify initiation of an accusation procedure by the grand jury, in my opinion, Councilmember Fox got off by the skin of his teeth. Both he and Councilmember Gillette can take full credit for what the grand jury stated in their official report, and I quote again, "The City Council's history of adversarial relationships, lack of cooperation, internal strife and acrimony, insulting citizenry, and extreme disrespectful rhetoric has been well documented for over a decade. Mr. Fox is running for his 4th term and Mr. Gillette for his 3rd term. I believe they're poster boys for the necessity of term limits in the city. On another note, did anyone notice the huge Orange County developer Steadfast Properties had us a political action committee? They made a $550 donation to Andy Fox. I wonder what they want in Thousand Oaks, and is more money coming Fox's way? I predict Councilmember Fox will receive more or do damage control and return the donation dramatically. This doesn't look good for Mr. Fox, who pretends to be slow growth at election time. In reference to a prior speaker's comments on slow growth and adhering to the city standards, that very person has been in violation for 9 years with his restaurant on the city. And that isn't a very good example for somebody that's supposed to represent us. So you might not listen to what he says very seriously. You know, we need to take care of our own house before we talk about others. And I have another acronym instead of the K people.
Your time is up, Mrs. Gregory. You're 15 minutes past your allotted time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nick Kidwai, followed by Jerry Louie.
I don't know if I'm a caveman. Nick Iqbal Kidwai. Begin the name of God, who's most beneficial, most merciful. My name is Nick Iqbal Kidwai. Last time I checked, Director of Concerned Citizens, Dr. Lancy, and I'm still resident of Newbury Park. Well, believe it or not, I made it into the green packet after a long time. This is what it looks like. It's on the website also nowadays, in the supplemental one today. Last week I talked about the grand jury report and how it would be wonderful to have it part of the Shakespeare Festival, and lo and behold, I checked the agenda on Friday, and I see that they are getting an award here. So I had already sent this email to Camp Shakespeare at kingsmanshakespeare.org, donor at Kingsman Shakespeare, and volunteer at shakespeare.com. And I just want to quickly read some of it or most of it. Dear Shakespeare actors, administrators, directors, I'm excited, not only because I hope to see Othello this Saturday, unfortunately my wife didn't want to go, but because I want to give you the opportunity of many centuries. You can do a play on our esteemed city council. Mayor and former VPCLU, Denny Gillette, wrote and is part of the record that this is a, quote, dysfunctional council. And his words, not mine. Remember Desmodenia? I cannot pronounce that Greek lady's name. Well, there are 2 of them on the dais. You take your pick. There used to be Scarlett on the dais, but she went back to the land of Elvis, to Tennessee. The golden opportunity is the sad but true report of our late, and this is the great achievement that Mrs. De La Pena made, to remind us that poor grand jury foreman is no longer with us, but his grand jury report continues to live on. It's on the website. You can read it. All the 46 findings which have exonerated the former speaker, Mrs. Gregory, and the sad story of how the great 30-year veteran Phil Gatch was removed. I mean, completely illegally. It would make great, true drama. And I appeal to the Shakespearean people and other artists to do a play. I mean, I think they can make a lot of money. I remember I came here on a Saturday about 5 years ago. There was activity going on, and I heard the guy from Saturday Night Live make fun of the council. And I went there, and he was imitating the city council. And people were just rolling off the desk. I mean, there's an opportunity here to make money as well as do the community good. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Our final speaker under public comments, Mr. Jerry Louie.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Jerry Louie from Thousand Oaks. I had intended to speak last week, but I ran into a little bit of a personal emergency, had to leave. I apologize for that. The good news is I was able to watch the replay on the web, and I was particularly pleased to be able to jump directly to the item I was interested in, and since this is one of the 49 recommendations that the Budget Task Force that I chaired made, I was very pleased to see it in place. The one suggestion I would make is you publicize this a little more for the communities that everyone can take advantage of it. It's really a good service. The comments I would make on the grand jury report regarding Cincel Council, it's okay to make tonight because I don't think my comments would have had any effect on your decision. I think the people decide on which version of the facts are correct. I speak with the background as a grand juror. I serve in the grand jury, and even today, at this time, I teach new grand jurors about things like how to do responses. I'm very familiar with the process. I might also make a comment, just for the record, that the grand jury made a slight technical error when they compare the accusation process to an indictment. It's not. A better analogy is an impeachment, because the only penalty, should the person be found guilty, is removal from office. No fine, no jail time, unlike an indictment. And we all know about impeachment from recent events in our country. So that's a better, for future reference, you might want to keep that in mind. Also a reminder to staff, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, one of your responses, and a very legal response, said that you need more time to study the issue that had to do with the Code of Ethics, and you still must make a response within 6 months of the date of the initial report. I'm sure you're aware of that, and I'm sure you'll take care of that. Your response was certainly very complete and thorough and timely. But the major point I want to make has to do with the district attorney letter that was included in the package. Now, the district attorney made the comment that, first of all, he saw no justification violation of the Brown Act, and he would not comment on the alleged violation of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code because it is not his purview to prosecute such violations. So my question is, who would? Suppose there had been sufficient evidence to bring forward an indictment in this case against the municipal code. Who would prosecute it? Someone has to. It's a crime, is it not? It may be a misdemeanor, a crime nevertheless. I don't think it would fall in the purview of the recently adopted administrative penalty provision that I had a little bit to do with as a member of the Residents' Roundtable, where a simple administrative fine can take care of a violation such as your hedges are too high or you're making too much noise or things of that nature. I don't think the kind of allegation made against one of the council members would be handled by an administrative penalty. So I believe that perhaps the city attorney and the city manager should look into this and provide a response to the community as to who would prosecute alleged violations of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code. And finally, have a great holiday. You deserve it.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers under public comment. Item 6. Item 7, City and Redevelopment Agency consent calendar. Item 7. I have one speaker card. You want to hear the speaker first, or? Okay. Item 7, H and L, if I read this correctly, Mr. Kidwai.
Speaking on my favorite part of the budget of the agenda, 7, H and L, which is supposed to be routine consent calendar. With all due respect, Mayor, the big issue in this city is not slow growth. Has not been for a dozen+ years. It's how the city is not managed in a professional manner. And despite little bites at the apple, i.e. consent calendar items are printed. Just before coming, I printed both of these, and they are in my car. I didn't get a chance to, I ran out here. And that was one of the problems. I mean, this city council used to meet at 7:30 and all that. At 6 o'clock is hard for working people to participate fully. But the interesting thing is H and L. These kind of things happen all the time. Why are they considered routine? Why is there never any discussion about street overlays? That's what is H, which is expenditure of $54,000. Well, the answer might be, well, we do discuss these things, Mr. Kidwai, during our budget discussions or etc. But even if they are discussed during the budget discussions, which I've been taking part of in the last 10 years, they are done at a very cursory level. In fact, on this street overlay issue, since I was on the budget task force and I was the chair of the subcommittee on public works, I talked with staff, and in fact I have had an ongoing talk with the director, who was kind enough to come to our neighborhood, along with 5 or 6 staff people, to argue their point of view that the overlay was not due on this on the street. But as a citizen, I don't have much clout. When the city council is supposed to lay the policy, and the policy is made by staff, this is what is the problem, because the city council is not aggressive enough on these kind of issues. In fact, I did not even mark it, but I think you will let me speak about Wings and Roots, about the $500,000 that you are getting. It's number N, which is free money. This was acted upon in 1994, and since that time, the same provider seems to get the money. I was going to, and you should really do it, is take the $560,000 and divide that the number of kids. How much money is it trickling down to the kids? And that includes the free use of the building which the city gives. So these are the kind of things that you folks who are spending your time volunteering for the city should really have discussions about, rather than be sidetracked on the grand jury report and etc.
Okay, that concludes our speakers on consent. Pleasure of the council, I would hold item H and take everything except H. I will ask Mrs. Bildale-Pena to take H. I will recuse myself. This is consistent with past discussions on this item. I live in the impacted area. So, pleasure of the council. Dr. Glanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the exception of H, I move the consent calendar.
Motion to move. Comments to the motion? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Ms. Bildale-Pena, would you take the chair for purposes of handling item H, approved expenditure?
Certainly, Mayor Gillette. Item 7H, approved expenditure regarding the street overlay project. We don't have any speaker cards regarding that. We already heard from Mr. Kidwai. Any additional comments regarding item 7H? None? Please vote.
And the maker of the motion?
Then I will be the maker of the motion.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you, Mrs. Bildale-Pena. Item 8, public hearings. At this time, would the city clerk please open item 8A, public hearing, MCA 2006-70248.
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8A, MCA 2006-70248, allow precise plan of design applications for single-story additions to single-family residences where added area exceeds 50% of the original building footprint be processed administratively. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing. All documents for City Council and the official city records should be presented to the City Clerk prior to public speaking, allowing dissemination to Council and staff. I have no cards for this item.
Thank you. At this time, staff report, Mr. Prescott, Director, Community Development Director, and Steve DeGeorge, Associate Planner. Mr. Prescott.
Yes, I'll just make some brief introductory comments, and then Mr. DeGeorge will make the department presentation on this agenda item. I just wanted to call to the City Council's attention the memorandum in the supplemental packet commencing at page 28, and it submits and is incorporated in the staff recommendation a correction to the ordinance and a conforming correction to the resolution. And basically the correction is to add the underlined language indicated on page 28. That language, which reads, where the added floor area exceeds 50% of the original building footprint, is part of the existing, it is actually the existing code text, which was inadvertently deleted in the copy of the ordinance and resolution that's in your regular packet, so that language needs to be added in. It clarifies that, and this relates to areas that are a mix of 1- and 2-story homes, that 2-story or second floor additions where the added area exceeds 50% would go to Planning Commission. Without that language, all 2-story and second-story additions would go to Planning Commission. And the current ordinance provides that even if it's a 2-story addition, if it's less than 50%, it's an administrative application. And that was intended to be kept, and it was inadvertently deleted from the ordinance. So again, the staff recommendation includes the changes to the ordinance and resolution that are on pages 28 and 29 of the supplemental packet, and those are merely corrections to the ordinance and resolution in your packet. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. DeGeorge for the staff presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Gillette and council members. Before you this evening is an amendment to the municipal code that would allow administrative review rather than Planning Commission review of single-story additions over 50% of the building footprint to single-family residences. Also, to consider making conforming changes to the precise plan of design resolution. The purpose of this amendment is to reduce the number of applications for certain additions to single-family homes to be reviewed by the Planning Commission while still providing adjacent property owners and neighbors an opportunity for review and comment. It's really to simplify the process for single-story additions. As you may recall, the Planning Commission, after nearly 3 years of reviewing additions to single-family residences under the city's mansionization ordinance, requested staff to review the numbers and types of cases that required Commission review. The goal of the Commission's request was to have staff bring back possible recommendations for revisions to the ordinance. What staff found was that of the 62 precise plan of design applications that the Planning Commission reviewed during 2004 and 2005, only 2 single-story additions received any opposition. Despite the low occurrence of opposition to single-story additions to single-family residences, they consumed a great deal of the Commission's time and cost homeowners additional fees and time delays. As the code currently reads, the Planning Commission reviews in cases where developments are in exclusively single-story, where the developments are exclusively single-story. The Planning Commission reviews all 2-story additions, single-story additions exceeding 50% of the original footprint, and this is what staff is proposing to delete, demolition and rebuilding of homes exceeding 150% of the original footprint. In developments that are a mix of single-story and 2 or more story homes, additions exceeding 50% of the original building footprint, this staff is proposing to delete and add the following: 2-story or second-story additions where the added floor area exceeds 50% of the original building footprint, and those homes that are demolished and rebuilt exceeding 150% of the original building footprint, or second-story additions exceeding 75% of the building footprint. The Planning Commission unanimously supported allowing single-story additions exceeding 50% of the building footprint of single-family homes to be processed administratively. The Commission found that it would be a positive change to the process that benefits applicants by reducing the time and expense of processing applications for room additions that already met city standards. They were pleased that the notice and administrative hearing, if requested, would still be required. Staff's recommendation is that the Council introduce the ordinance to approve MCA 2006-70248 and make conforming changes to the precise plan of design resolution by rescinding the current resolution and adopting the new resolution with the changes. With that, I'll conclude my presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Mrs. Belda-Lapena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Just to clarify, did the Planning Commission review this recommendation that is in our supplemental package tonight with a revision from 75 to 50 for two-story additions?
That's not the revision that's in the packet there. The revision is to make clear that the ordinance did not delete language. It's already in the code relating to the requirement for Planning Commission review only when the added floor area exceeds 50% of the original footprint.
I see that it is a correction from what was in the staff report.
Not in the report, in the ordinance that was presented along with the staff report. The staff report correctly describes the purpose of the amendment and the scope of the amendment, which it deals only with single-story additions. The ordinance had an error in it, which we are correcting tonight.
And in which case would Planning Commission review be required?
And this is in the if the project is located in an area that is a mix of single-story and two-story homes, Planning Commission review would be required if it is a two-story addition or an addition on the second story of a house where that added area exceeds 50% of the footprint of the structure.
Thank you.
Additional questions of staff? There being none, I have no cards on this item. Therefore, I'll close the public hearing. Staff discussion. What's the pleasure of the council? Dr. Glancy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity to sit on the Planning Commission when we had a great many of these hearings on particularly the single-story additions to single-story houses, and they certainly were a time filler. Awful lot of it was rubber stamped. The issues that really arose that required some thought were typically the two-story additions that involved encroachment on the adjacent person, privacy issues and things of that nature. So I'm glad to see what's before us tonight, because it still gives the public the right to appeal and testify if they don't like the project. So it would be my pleasure to move the motion.
Thank you. And if I understand, there are two parts to this. The first one is to introduce the attached ordinance to approve MCA 2006-70248. Is that done by reading the ordinance in title only, further reading to be waived? Okay. And adopting the updated guidelines and standards relating to precise plans of design in order to allow the PPD applications for single-family additions, single-family homes where the added area exceeds 50% of the original building footprint to be processed administratively rather than requiring Planning Commission review. That's the complete recommendation? Okay. All right. Please vote.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Item B, I'm sorry, 8B, permit processing fees for massage establishments and massage technicians. Mr. Adams, Department of Finance Director, and Captain Randy Pennis, Thousand Oaks Police Department.
Thank you, Mayor Gillette. Good evening, Council. Tonight, the item before you is a resolution to adopt fees related to the practice of massage. As you are aware, earlier this month, City Council adopted a municipal code amendment regarding massage establishments, massage technicians, and the practice of massage. As a result, fee amounts for the licensing for the practice of massage were removed from the ordinance and will be listed in the citywide fee schedule to ensure inclusion in the biannual fee recovery analysis performed by staff. Staff is recommending adoption of 3 new fees to ensure full cost recovery of staff time to regulate the practice of massage. The city already has 2 fees that are currently collected in licensing massage establishments, which are an issuance fee of $10 and a photo ID fee of $6. The 3 new fees are listed or as follows. One is a new license application fee of $100. License renewal fee of $50, and an annual health inspection fee of $96. In addition to these regulatory fees, massage establishments and technicians are still required to pay a business license tax and fees associated with the issuance of a business tax certificate. The massage license and business license will be issued separately. Staff's recommendation is upon adoption of the fees, we will include the fees in our biannual user fee study and will be adjusted based upon actual experience during the next 9 months, with any revisions returned to City Council effective July 2007. At this time, staff recommends adopting the resolution and is available for questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Mrs. Bildel-Opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. I was just wondering if you could tell me percentage-wise the increase over the proposed renewals and new licenses compared to the current fees.
For technicians, it is estimated to be approximately $50. The current, if I'm not mistaken, the current is 25, 10, and 16, 42 plus, give me a second. 53 versus estimated of 103, so an increase of $50. It's approximately 100% increase. To further explain on the increase, the prior ordinance had fees that had not been adjusted since '78. With the review of the background check, we're increasing the costs associated to that administrative review.
So you say this hasn't been increased since 1978?
There has been no changes to fees.
Okay, so I just find that it is a little bit drastic to all of a sudden go perhaps even beyond the 100% increase. Have you considered taking it in incremental steps year after year, rather than just all of a sudden the big increase at once?
Staff did not consider incremental increases.
And what is the reason for that?
With the policy of full cost recovery on fees, we're looking to ensure that the practice of regulating massages, the costs are captured for that practice.
Mr. Mitnick, please.
If I can elaborate on John's point there on the full cost recovery, it is council's policy that we are a full cost recovery city, and that's why these fees are being adjusted. It also illustrates the downside of going a number of years without adjusting fees. So we prefer to do it on an annual basis or some other regular cycle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Glancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question just for my own information. Why does the technician charge a business license tax if they're an employee of the establishment?
Massage technicians are not employees of the establishment. They're independent contractors.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional questions of staff? There being none, I'll close the public hearing. Will of the council. Dr. Glancy?
You know, Councilmember Bildel-Opinion had her hand up with her pencil waving at me, so I yield the floor.
Okay, that's fine. Mrs. Bildel-Opinion?
Thank you very much, Dr. Glancy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do see the need to increase the fees since they haven't been raised since 1978, obviously. However, I'm a little bit apprehensive about a more than 100% increase. I would like to make a motion to approve staff with a 50% increase rather than a 100% increase.
Okay, we have a motion. Comment to the motion. Mrs. Irwin?
I will not be supporting the motion. We talked already about full cost recovery, and I think that we should adhere to council policy.
Thank you. Dr. Clancy?
Thank you. I too won't support the motion. I'm more in favor of the motion as presented by staff.
Okay, and without going through a motion, I won't support it either just because of the nature of this, the amount of time went into it. It's unfortunate that it hasn't been adjusted since then, but we're correcting something that should have been corrected a long time ago, and I agree with you, Ms. Spill's opinion. They should be on a regular and routine basis so that they aren't so alarming at one time, but this is an appropriate adjustment, and even though the percentage is high, the amount is relative, so I will not be supporting it. But we can go ahead and go through if you want to go through it. Okay, fine. Any additional comments as the maker of the motion, Ms. Spill's opinion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason why I'm proposing this is because it will affect small businesses and rather drastically. I feel that if we do it incrementally, it would be much more beneficial to the massage technicians as well as small business establishments.
Thank you. Please vote.
Motion fails 1-3.
Thank you. Mrs. Irwin?
I will go ahead and move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Comments to the motion? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 3-1. Councilmember Bill De La Pena dissenting.
Thank you. Item 9A, department reports. Verizon, fiber to premises, encroachment permit, and franchise issues. This is a verbal report, and I believe the action on this is receive and file, or the recommended action on this is receive.
Confirm the direction that staff is.
Confirm direction for staff. Fine. We may clarify that when we get further into it. City Manager, Mr. Mitnick, Public Works Director, Mr. Watkins, Deputy Community Services Director, Stacy Maneson, and City Attorney, Amy Albano. Mr. Mitnick, you want to start?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. With this agenda item, as the mayor indicated, the purpose is basically that of information. Your staff, as well as representatives from Verizon, would like to present to you an overview of what the fiber to the premises, or more commonly referred to as FTTP, really is, and how it's working, and what the issues are ahead for the City of Thousand Oaks and its residents. This issue can be bifurcated into two categories at this point, the first being the actual installation of the system, and for that we'll have Mark Watkins, our Public Works Director, provide an overview of that and what the issues are, and then with recommendations. And those recommendations are really, there's no action items tonight. Staff is seeking council confirmation of the direction that we're pursuing. Then after that, Stacy Manazian, the Assistant Community and Cultural Services Director, will provide an overview of the franchise issues associated with that, and we'll have a recommendation. Amy Albano, our City Attorney, will be able to comment on the legal aspects of that. And by way of information for council and the members of the viewing public, staff will come back with a hearing on the franchise agreement, I believe on September 12th. And then after Stacy gives that presentation, then Tim McCallion, the president for the Pacific Division of Verizon, will provide a presentation and overview to the council and be available to answer questions. And we are pleased to have Mr. McCallion here. He's also, as he will indicate to you, a very proud resident of Thousand Oaks, and Verizon is based here in Thousand Oaks, at least their West Coast operations. So we are very pleased to have them as a corporate citizen. And then at the end of that, I will then summarize and recap on the issues raised. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark Watkins, our Public Works Director.
Mr. Watkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mitnick, members of the City Council. Quick picture of what we took in Camarillo. Camarillo has recently gone through fiber installation. I think that city is about 3/4 done. So we've been in contact with some of our colleagues there to find out and learn a little bit more in depth what some of the impacts are. Background on this, in the fall of 2004, we were first approached by Verizon. At that point, certainly through other professional contacts, we began to learn about the fiber to the premises project and what was potentially out there. I know that Mr. McCallion with Verizon will go through in a lot more detail, but fiber to the premises expands beyond the fiber network that has existed in this city with the cable system and actually constructs an entirely new fiber optic system all the way to the home. So rather than just the backbone being fiber, you've actually got the capability for fiber optics all the way into the home. That also puts the telephone company in the position of being able to offer both cable TV in addition to telephone and internet. A quick background and why this is somewhat unique to Thousand Oaks and maybe very different here than it is in other cities. 10 years ago, 1996, the city was approached by, at that time, GTE Americast with the proposal to construct a citywide cable TV system. And at that point, the city entered into franchise negotiations and a franchise was granted and a dual cable system was put into place within the city. The city supported this approach because the opportunity for competing cable seemed like it would have benefits to the residents because you'd have two fully functioning cable systems within the city, and through that competition, we assumed that we would be getting both lower rates and higher service. The trade-off for that was that with that system, approximately 140 miles of city streets were trenched using an open-cut trench construction method. We're not sure with this fiber optic network that Verizon is proposing what that percentage of streets would be, but we're assuming it would be a similar percentage of streets that would be trenched for this project also. The impacts of those trenches is that it's not only just a longitudinal trench down the street, but also transverse trenches to every residence or every two residents, so you've got the ability to get the fiber optics to the home. In the historical perspective, this was to get the cables to the home. In this case, the open-cut construction was used. The trenches were all patched properly and the construction was fine, but they weren't slurry sealed. And so what you had was basically an issue with the very visible trench lines both down the street and across the street, and the city dealt with literally hundreds of complaints. Ultimately, what the city did was undertake a 4-year program to slurry seal all of the streets that were done out there at a cost to the city of around $1 million. At that time, the cable company did not contribute, although they did prepay some of the franchise fees to help the city offset that. Verizon then took over or became the corporate owner of GT Americast in around the year 2000. Some of the construction and right-of-way impacts that we can expect are both temporary and permanent. The temporary, of course, is just the impacts from the construction itself. And in our discussions with other cities, and I'll refer primarily to Camarillo because they're the closest, at one point they had literally 30 different construction crews out and around their city. They've since honed that down and they've narrowed it down so they're keeping it at around 2 crews. But depending on how the process moves forward, the construction impacts on the various neighborhoods can be fairly intense. If it's managed well, then every individual household or every individual street would only have an impact of hopefully around a week. It would also be important to do a fair amount of public outreach because when you go into an entire neighborhood and start trenching the streets or performing that level of construction, people need to know both what's going on currently and what they can expect to happen. The permanent impacts are in regards to the trench cuts and the street restoration. And this is really the primary concern of the Public Works Department. When a street's initially constructed and the hot asphalt is put down and rolled curb to curb, you know, it's kind of similar to weaving a fabric or something, and then after it's been cut, it can be sewn back in place, but it's never quite like it was the first time. And so trench cuts are minimized to the greatest extent possible, and they are a concern to those who have to maintain streets. If the trench cuts are significant enough, then we do require a slurry seal of the whole street. The other impacts on a permanent basis is in regards to the dual systems. With the dual cable systems that went in, you end up with 2 complete systems within the roadway. In this case, as the new FTTP goes in, Verizon will end up again with 2 complete systems. They'll continue to operate their old copper system because they will continue to have customers on that system for a long, long time. And they will also have a new fiber system. And the impacts is that one of our responsibility is the regulation and control of the right-of-way. And so numerous utility companies operate within the right-of-way, and it's our job to track where those go and to assign different portions of the street right-of-way. And so over time, the street right-of-ways do become more crowded. The types of things that the average resident would notice, though, is that there is additional street furniture or distribution hubs, and those are the above-ground boxes that people see and that generally they don't mind having as long as they're not in their own front yard. But those are the boxes that are used for both telephone, cable, traffic signal control systems, Edison, and others, and this would basically double the amount of those, at least within that one system. In general, within this city, we've got 3 different installation scenarios. We've got situations where there is existing underground conduit, and that conduit is adequate to pull new fiber optic cable. The situations where that exists are primarily the newer parts of town, so that would be Dos Vientos, Lang Ranch type areas where the existing underground conduit exists and it's adequate. In other areas, the utility lines are overhead, and those are typically the older parts of town, and in those cases, the new fiber optic system would also be going overhead. And then the final situation is where new underground conduit is required. And those are the areas that cause us the greatest concern, because those are the areas where we have the greatest impact during construction and the greatest permanent impacts in regards to the trenches. Just a couple of quick slides on trenching. You know, the impacts primarily or oftentimes are somewhat aesthetic, but they're also, from an engineering perspective, there is no way to put the street back exactly the way it was. And then with depending upon the construction methods chosen, there would be longitudinal trenches and transverse trenches. The requirements that we have put on Verizon thus far is that an encroachment permit is required for each distribution hub that they construct. And so the distribution hubs serve somewhere between, say, 140, 160 homes. And so we've been controlling the amount of work that they've done depending on by issuing permits on a hub-by-hub basis. Those hubs are the above-ground boxes that one would see, and those have been individually located and approved by the city. So far, the only streets that have, or the only permits that have been issued are those where the existing conduit exists or they're going overhead. For any streets that would have a longitudinal and transverse trench cut, we have told Verizon that they would have to slurry seal the street. For streets where they're using the trenchless technology, and I'll show you some examples of this, this is primarily what was used in Camarillo, those kind of construction methods, then the standard type of trench repair would be acceptable. So just a quick background, in January of this year is when we issued our first permits. Those permits were issued only in those areas where the utility lines were either overhead or existing underground conduit existed. Let me share just a little bit about Camarillo, because that's the closest city to us. In that city, approximately 3/4 of the work has been done over the last 2 years. They've primarily used directional drilling techniques, and what that means is that you still have to open up a section in the street. It might be, say, a 3-foot by 4-foot trench in the street, and then you can, in essence, push a conduit to the next little piece where you have to open it up. And so rather than having a continuous trench, what you end up with is a series of smaller holes, both, again, longitudinally and transverse with the streets. Camarillo did indicate that they had a number of challenges with the project, although most of those challenges they feel have been overcome, and the project is proceeding successfully at this time. Camarillo is not requiring overlays or slurry seals, except in rare situations where trenching had to be done, but typically what they're seeing is the boring instead. Verizon has been reimbursing them for their inspection fees, and they have used some contract inspectors to inspect the work, and there has been some negotiations on streets that were within a moratorium, where Verizon has paid Camarillo for upcoming overlay work. This slide just indicates some of the construction impacts that could be anticipated. This is a cul-de-sac street, but on the right-hand side of the slide, if you can see it, there are a couple of small open trenches. Those would be for transverse work. And then every other household, the same types of trenches are opened up, and then at the end of the street, you'd have this boring machine, and this is doing the longitudinal boring. So these types of impacts would exist on any given street on the temporary basis only for about a week or so. And then you can see roughly the size of the holes and the trenches that are in the street. Those would reflect in the permanent patches that end up in the streets. And then this is the finished type scenario. This is what the street ends up looking like. You've got the patches that are going longitudinally down the streets. And then for the transverse, you end up with similar patches going back and forth across the street so that they can jack the conduits across. And then it's a little bit difficult to see in the slide, but it also does require that sidewalk panels be removed. So in addition to the asphalt patches, what you have is sidewalk panels also being removed in various spots. And primarily with the concrete, it's just more of an aesthetic issue because the concrete, when it does go back, does have similar engineering properties to the concrete that surrounds it. But if you consider the fact that this gets done with the whole neighborhood, you can be assured that there will be at least a few complaints that get voiced. Verizon has questioned the city's requirement for slurry seal the streets. They have not agreed to do that, and so none of the work has proceeded in any of the underground areas. And it's also important to know that Verizon has yet to submit complete plans for all areas of the city, so we don't know exactly what all the impacts would be. We're just making some assumptions based on what was done in the past and based on the plans that we've received so far. But with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy next, but from the Public Works end, what we would want for the City Council to do is confirm the policy that the staff has proceeded with so far, or give other direction or advice or recommendations to the staff in regards to whether or not the streets should be slurry sealed, whether if Verizon chooses to use an open cut trench. Now, they do have different options. They can choose to do the boring. They can choose to do open cut. At this point, they've tried to keep those options open. And so to try to accommodate those options is where we've given them the varying construction requirements that they would have to do when they're done. Now, the other thing it's important to note is that we have also told them we've got a very active slurry seal and overlay program in the city. So any of the streets that the city was going to be either slurry sealing or overlaying within the next 3 years, we would not put that requirement on them. So if it was within a 3-year time frame that we were going to be doing the work, then in that case, we would let them do a standard trench, and then when the city went in and did the overlay or the slurry seal, we would complete that curb-to-curb work on their behalf. We don't know, though, it could be that the streets we're doing are in the areas where they're already overhead. Like I said, we don't have a citywide plan yet to review, and so we're not sure how much that would overlap, but that was something that that the city had offered. So with that, I will let Ms. Managian take it. And
excuse me, any questions of Mr. Watkins? Excuse me 1 second, Ms. Irwin. Mr. Mitnick, you had a comment or an observation? Or,
Yeah.
Or were you waving at me?
No. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to point out, and Verizon will have an opportunity to address some of these issues too, but I wanted to point out for the council's benefit that hopefully most of this type of construction will be trenchless, therefore the slurry seal requirement would not be in place, and that's what you saw in Camarillo, correct?
yes, primarily that's what they did in Camarillo.
With respect to those streets that would have the trenching, we did demonstrate flexibility with Verizon by extending it out to 3 years, the requirement. So the staff has been very cooperative in trying to come up with a win-win type of solution. So I just wanted to point that out for council's benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further, Mrs. Irwin?
I just wanted to confirm that if you have the longitudinal transverse cuts, you always have the longitudinal cuts, you always have the transverse cuts also?
Yes. Yeah, if you're going to do an open trench, then I would assume it would be open trench in each way.
And then I couldn't quite see from the pictures, how big are those patches and how far apart are they?
I think they vary. I can go back. In general, they look like they're somewhere between 4 foot by 4 foot, 4 foot by 6 foot. I think they've got, and again, they can, Verizon can address this potentially in their presentation. You've got a pit where you're pushing from with the machine and a pit where you're receiving. I think the receiving pits are smaller than the pushing pits. But there would be, within any of the neighborhoods where they had to do the new underground construction, you would have a whole series of those up and down the street.
And why did you determine that that wouldn't require a slurry seal?
Within the ordinance, they give some discretion to the Public Works Director. We've got our city street standards on what trench methods are required and how to repair trenches. And there comes at some point a judgment call as to how much of an impact has been made on the street. And so we made the recommendation that for the smaller trenches that we couldn't justify that they would have to slurry seal curb to curb, but if they were doing a full open cut trench longitudinally and transverse, then we could.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Spildale, opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, the question I have is, does the city of Thousand Oaks have anywhere an example of a trenchless construction?
Yeah, we've used it personally within Public Works. We've used the trenchless technology a number of times. We've used it for both small jacking. We don't put in quite as small a conduit as Verizon does. We're normally the smallest we'd put in as a 6-inch. But the trenchless technology we typically have used is one pipe inside of another. We've used that extensively for sewer line rehabilitation. In that case, it's more of a manhole to manhole. But there's also, when you're putting smaller lines across the street, some of our water service lines, we can do the same thing. So we go from a main and just push across the street rather than opening it up.
Okay, so the city has done them, private companies,
Private companies do it also, yes.
So, and because I haven't seen as many patches around as we see in this Camarillo example, and what is normally the standard time that you wait before any of these patches, regardless of how they're caused, covered? That there's a slurry seal. Do we wait 3 years? Is it 2 years? Is it 1 year? What is the standard?
Typically, we're slurry sealing all the streets everywhere between 7 and 10 years. And then we're overlaying the streets in probably about a 25-year cycle. And so it just depends on when that street was overlaid last. Any of the streets that have been overlaid within the last 5 years are considered moratorium streets. So we've got a ordinance that says once we overlay the street, it shouldn't be cut for 5 years, and then there are some exceptions. And so if a street happened to have been, is it right in that range, then it would be another 15 years, or say could potentially be 5 years before we're out there with slurry seal, or 10 years. So it could be some period of time passes before we would get around to doing our maintenance.
So you're saying that we are allowing private companies, and I think that is probably a misunderstanding, to actually do the trenching, and sometimes we wait up to 5 years in order to cover the work?
Private companies, if you use as an example the development project just down the street here that we've finally referred to as The Rock, they've been cutting into Thousand Oaks Boulevard to do their utility connections. So they had to cut into Thousand Oaks Boulevard as an example to hook up their water, hook up their wastewater, and to connect to a storm drain. So in that case, they trenched the street and they did a trench repair. And so you very visibly see a patch out in the street. And that patch will stay like that until the city gets, as part of its routine work, does either a slurry seal or an overlay. But they're not required to do a curb-to-curb reconstruction of the street. They only patch back the trench that they cut. And that's typically what's done with all the utility companies.
Thank you.
Mrs. Irwin?
I just wanted to clarify, because you brought up another thing. You said there's a 5-year moratorium on cutting the street again. So what would happen then with the trenchless technology on one of those streets?
On those streets, if they cut into a moratorium street, then they would have to, no matter which method they use, they would have to then slurry it curb to curb.
Okay.
Or what they might choose to do is if they've got a phased implementation, I don't know how long it would take them to construct the whole city. We've given them all of our street overlay plans for the next several years, so they've got the ability to go in those streets and do them, and then we'll do the work. And then any of the streets that we've paved in the last few years, they could put those on the end of their schedule and wait for them to kind of fall out of the moratorium years.
Okay, so you have the streets that have the 5-year moratorium. So what does that mean the maximum amount of time would be before a patch would be covered?
I would say it could be probably in the 7 to 8 year range.
How often did you say you did a slurry seal?
In the 7 to 10 years. But now the slurry seals don't have a moratorium. That's only the overlay street. So that's when we actually put down the full mat of asphalt.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Being none. Mark, one of the things that I see occurring, especially with the residential construction that occurred late 60s, early 70s, the development firm, the contracting firms used materials from the house, this for sewer hookups, for laterals, from the house to the street, to the public connection at the curb. They used a material, Orangeburg. And from talking to some of your guys and just personal experience, that's failing in a number of areas. And so that's replacement. The city, and I believe even under county jurisdiction, there was a requirement for a much stronger material from the main to the curb. But all of that work, gas company work, water company work, All of that goes on all the time, and there's no guarantees that a water line won't burst or a gas line won't weaken or something. And we see these, I think the city requires hot patches when they're, as the final product when the utility is done.
Yes.
So we see these things showing up, and what I hear you saying is even with those, within 5 to 7 years from the time that happens, there's going to be, on virtually all city streets, some sort of a slurry seal process. Is that correct?
5 to 7 would be if we hit it just right. If this came after a previous one, it could be a little longer.
Okay.
But that's
okay. So less than 10 years?
Yes.
Okay. All right, fine. Stacy, were you next on this?
Yes.
Any further questions? Okay, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gillette and City Council. As Public Works stated, a franchise agreement is currently required for Verizon to operate a cable TV service in the city of Thousand Oaks, and staff is currently negotiating with Verizon for an agreement. This issue became much more immediately critical due to recent activity in the legislation at both the state and federal level. At the state level, AB 2987 provides for a state franchise as opposed to a local franchise. This bill was passed by the Assembly of a vote of 77 to 0. It allows for opt-out for existing providers. There are some issues on franchise fees, and support for PEG and INET is in jeopardy under this bill, as well as local control and enforcement. There's also federal legislation, and that has passed the House, and the debate has moved to the Senate. And the Senate bill, it does strengthen local control, and it is not expected to move quickly. Both the House and Senate will replace local franchising with a national scheme. Sorry. No, forward. The current negotiations with Verizon, the major issues are customer service. Verizon will be using the Dell computer business model. There will be no local office and no retail outlet. The response times are longer for customer concerns, and these standards do not take effect for the first 6 months. We are also continuing to negotiate the franchise fees, the definition of gross revenues, transfer issues. Currently, the city has the ability to deny or condition transfers, and Verizon's proposal will weaken that ability. And for PEG and INET support, Verizon is not willing to pay upfront fees, and the ongoing support is currently also in negotiations. The term of the agreement is 15 years with a 3-year out. Staff is looking for recommendation to complete the negotiations, and staff will bring the issue at the September 12th public hearing. It will be a public hearing. So staff is recommending that the City Council confirm direction of the negotiations. Staff's available for questions.
Thank you. Mrs. Albano.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of things to Stacy's so that it's clear. The AB 2987, it is in the Senate, and there's still negotiations occurring concerning things like PEG and INET. But the expectations of most people is that the bill will be passed out of the Senate, and then it would go to the governor. In terms of the negotiations that are currently taking place, one of the reasons we really did want to come to council tonight was not just on the FTTP, but to make sure the council was comfortable. Part of what is Verizon is doing is what they considered a national model. So some of their standards are national standards and are different than what we currently have in place. There isn't cable ordinance and things like customer service is different. So we just wanted to make sure that the council understood that and was comfortable for our being able to move along with the negotiations. And one of the big things, as Stacy mentioned, was the longer response times in some cases where it could take 5 to 6 days for a response to a customer problem with their cable service. The other thing that we wanted to say is that in terms of franchise fees, we feel really good about that part of the negotiations because we've had a lot of problems in the past with our franchise during audit time trying to figure out what is covered and ongoing disputes, and you may remember that from part of the litigation and settlement of those prior cases. Whereas this franchise, if we do finally reach final conclusion of negotiations, really clarifies what isn't and is included, and we believe that'll be really helpful for auditing and other purposes because we're all in agreement on that. The transfer issue, the reason we're bringing that to you is we feel that we've met some middle ground with Verizon on that issue. One of our big concerns is that currently when there are transfers that are going to take place, under federal law, there is quite a process that needs to be followed, and there's information that you as the local franchising agency receives, and you have to pass on them. And one of the big things that's done during a renewal, or not a renewal, a transfer, is to look at compliance issues and make sure that the obligations to bring the franchise into compliance happens, and we're hoping that we've met some middle ground on that. But we wanted council's blessing because this is how we got into the original litigation with Verizon, and that the whole issue was there a transfer when Adelphia took over the system? Wasn't. And so we have not only a history over streets, we had a history over transfers. So we just wanted to make sure that you understood that. The PEG and INET, that's probably a bigger issue that we're hoping to get to make some headway on, and we believe we are. Everyone is working very diligently to come to a conclusion, but there are requirements in state law that we have to abide by. Even with the new state legislation that's taking place, there are requirements that there is what's called parity. And so we're working with Verizon to make sure that we can meet those obligations in state law, as well as build-out obligations. And Verizon's been very good about build-out obligations and meeting those. And the last one is the term is longer than terms of other franchises. That's allowable, but we wanted to get a sense from the council that you were comfortable with the 15 years. So with that, I agree. We just really are looking for confirmation. We truly hope that through August that we will be able to reach the rest agreement on everything and be able to be in a position to bring a franchise to you on September 12th. And both Stacy and I are available to answer any questions as it relates to the franchise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Albano. Additional questions? Do you have questions? Bill Delphine, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question regarding the customer service. We mentioned longer response times as well as no standards for the first 6 months. I don't know who may be able to answer that question regarding what exactly that will mean, no standards at all during the first 6 months.
I think what Verizon said, and they'll be here, maybe they want to speak to it themselves, but during negotiations, their concern is that when it gears up and they first start offering the services, that if they're inundated, which we hope they are, with new customers, that it may take them longer to respond, to get the person hooked up, get someone out there, get the system running, and that there inherently in a new system may be issues that come up and they may not be able to handle everything that could happen in the first 6 months. But once they were past that's getting all the kinks out. We're explaining to you that what we've been told is that is their national model that they have now instituted, and that's what they're looking for, and that was not really negotiable from their standpoint, because they do have concerns. I don't think it means that they're not going to try their best to meet their customers' wishes, because obviously you want to make a good impression for new customers, but that they were concerned about binding themselves in the franchise to those standards. But I will also say Verizon's going to do a presentation. They may have more to say on that issue.
And then the other question I had was regarding the term of the agreement. The previous term we had with another provider was it 10 years?
Yes.
Thank you.
Quite frankly, the staff is not opposed to 15 years, because with all the changes going on, I think it'd be safe to say that I'm not sure that that 15 years from now, that there will be cable franchises as we know them, either because of technology or because of all the changes in the law. And one of the things we glossed over a little bit is what's happening with the state law, which is of concern, is that it has an opt-out provision, which means that if someone comes in under the state franchising, if that law passes, then everyone could operate under the state franchise. We think it's really important to maintain local control, and that's why we feel it's very important to achieve an agreement with Verizon, because we'd rather have a direct franchise and not a state one. But I think that, quite frankly, in 10 to 15 years, the landscape will look very different than it does today.
Additional questions of staff? There being none? Okay. I have some speaker cards. I'm sorry.
I believe we're going to Mr. McCallion, right?
It's the speaker card.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. All right. As mentioned earlier, I have some speaker cards. I have 3 speaker cards that are available for questions only. Kurt Reese, Steve Fogelstrom, and Albert Ellman. And I assume they're backup information and technical support for any questions that may come up from the council. I notice Mr. Dokken doesn't have a card in here, but then again, he's about to become a retiree, so we probably don't really need to hear from him anymore anyhow. With that thought in mind, let me call the one speaker that we do have, Mr. Tim McCallion, who is the president of Verizon West and a resident of Thousand Oaks. Mr. McCallion, thank you so much for coming down this evening to enlighten us. That's fine.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Gillette, City Council. As indicated, I'm Tim McCallion, Verizon's West Region President and also a resident of Thousand Oaks. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight to talk about Verizon's fiber to the premise upgrade. Basically, what this is that we are upgrading the telephone network in Thousand Oaks with the most modern cutting-edge technology that's available today. And I'm very proud that we are doing it right here in Thousand Oaks, which is the West Region headquarters for Verizon. Before I talk about that, let me first express my thanks to City Council, City staff, and the residents of Thousand Oaks, just for everything that you do to make Thousand Oaks such a great place for Verizon employees to live and to work. We're very, very proud to be in this city. As you know, Verizon and its employees are very involved in the community, and as was mentioned, that direction has been under the leadership of John Dokken, our External Affairs Director, who is here with me today. So I know Verizon's no stranger to the City Council, and certainly Mr. Dokken isn't either. I will go through a brief PowerPoint presentation about fiber to the premise and how we're revolutionizing the way we live, work, and play in California with our Verizon broadband service. If you please go to the next slide. This is truly a transformation that takes our network well beyond the 21st century with unmatched network capacity and capabilities that I'm going to be telling you more about in a minute. We'll build this network in 2 phases. The first phase will take place generally west of Highway 23. We actually are following our existing network, and in Thousand Oaks we have 3 what we call wire centers, Newberry Park Wire Center, the Conejo Wire Center. Those are primarily west of the 23, and then we have our Thousand Oaks Wire Center. Some of you have seen the building right down on Thousand Oaks Boulevard and Rancho Road, and that is the last section that we will be doing in Thousand Oaks. Next slide. Why are we doing this upgrade and why are we doing it now? Simply put, we need to meet the demands and anticipate the demands of our customers for the future who are tapping into the power of the internet to do all kinds of things at home, to telecommute, to start home-based businesses, to download entertainment or large files of photos from families back east, and dial-up and current technologies such as DSL and cable modem aren't going to meet those demands as time goes on. Fiber to the premise does meet those needs. A fiber connection right to the home delivers much clearer phone calls, data speeds that today go to 30 megabits per second and soon will go well beyond, and will provide an unparalleled alternative to cable television service. If you go to the next slide, please. This slide is a good illustration of how Fios, which is the brand name for our products, can change the lives of our families in Thousand Oaks. If you have a fiber to the premise connection, several members of the household can enjoy all kinds of applications and services at the same time. For example, mom could be working from home and uploading her presentation for the next day at work. Dad and one of the kids could be ordering a movie on demand, and another son could be playing a game with someone across town or across the country with a super fast internet connection. And this can all occur on a fiber optic network simultaneously without degrading the signal. We also believe that the killer application for this network from a video perspective is going to be high-definition television. I recently read an article that over 1/2 of all the television sets sold today in this country are now high-definition TV sets. That can be covered with existing technologies, but as we go in the future, just think about it. People are going to start to buy a second and perhaps a third high-definition television. That takes a lot of bandwidth to deliver those signals at the same time, and to deliver those signals at the same time that someone in the household is going to be on the internet or working from home and using additional bandwidth. With fiber optic cable, we'll have the capability to deliver those services without degrading the quality for the people who are on it. That's why when we talk about Fios and fiber to the premise, we say it's truly revolutionary. I have about a 2-minute and 20-second video, if we could roll the video that says a little bit more about fiber to the premise.
They called it the Iron Horse. Cut loose by the golden spike. And when the Transcontinental Railroad roared across the country, the country was transformed. Now, another engine of transformation. The broadband transformation. Streaming across the country. Powered by the speed of light. Optical fiber. Laser quick and pumping out new possibilities. High-def movies on your set-top box. Down in a blink and sharp and clean. With you at the controls. Medical diagnostics in the home or the doctor's office. Hospitals able to access records in record time, saving lives. Distance learning in the class or at home in real time, or serve up the Smithsonian on your kitchen table with the click of a mouse. Home security and law enforcement, eye to eye, keeping your community safe and connected. Local business, tapped in and turned on with a suite of digital services and sheer digital power.
Where's Christina? It's right there, number 11. This is live. Yeah, it's live.
Gaming, file sharing, data swapping, video conferencing, emailing and IMing. Voice, video and data on pipelines of light. with room to grow and go faster, keeping you better informed, connected, and entertained. Your world on light rails of speed, streaming faster and faster.
And that's why I'm so excited about bringing fiber to the premise to Thousand Oaks. It truly is the network of the future. It has capabilities well beyond crystal clear voice service, well beyond being another cable TV provider, and well beyond just fast internet access. It truly is the network for the future. If we could go back to the PowerPoint. We have deployed fiber to the premise in a number of states around the country. We've learned a lot as we've been doing this, and we have a pretty solid track record. We have the vendors, the technology, the people, and the unwavering support of our corporate leadership and our investors, which is extremely important to get this construction done. We do know how to build and run telecommunications networks. It's what we do best. We are offering Fios TV in several communities already here in California, and we actually have deployed the network in parts or the entirety of 30 communities already in California. And you can see on the overhead that includes Camarillo, which was discussed earlier today, Malibu, some beach communities like Hermosa Beach, Huntington Beach, and then we've done extensive deployment in Riverside County, including Beaumont and Marietta, the first two communities in which we've actually been offering Fios TV service. Next slide, please. As discussed earlier, revolutionizing a network is a major undertaking. It's a project that won't be complete overnight, and it's a project that is being done with great care, but nonetheless, it is an infrastructure project. We began building our fiber to the premise network in 2004 in California. We've learned much from the initial phase of that deployment, and we have in place rigorous quality control processes that ensure that everything we do in the community goes as smoothly as it possibly can, given the nature of the fact that it's a construction process. Perhaps our greatest learning experience from our fiber to the premise deployment is this, and that is that a partnership with the communities is essential. To deliver the benefits of this network to residents, it's important to balance significant and very important issues such as permitting issues, street ceiling issues, with the ability to be able to build a network on a cost-effective basis. And that is important to us. We live in the communities. We want to be very proud of the construction work that we've done in the communities. But if impediments are put in our way that raises the cost of construction, we won't economically be able to bring this new technology into the communities. We think with the work we've done with city staff to date, we've been able to strike the right balance between the requirements of the city and the requirements of Verizon relative to constructing that network. Next slide, please. To that end, we look forward to continuing to work with the city staff on a smooth permitting process. We'll work diligently to negotiate a cable franchise so that we can deliver the benefits of cable choice and competition to Thousand Oaks as soon as possible. When we began negotiating cable franchises over a 2-year period of time, we actually were only able to successfully negotiate five cable franchises, a very, very slow process. We actually, within the past 30 days, have received 5 more cable franchises. So the process has sped up. I'm sure that we have gotten better at negotiating. I'm sure the desire of some communities to have cable franchises in place before any potential state or federal legislation has also sped up the process. But we have negotiated, and while we do work off a model franchise agreement, Clearly, we have at least 10 communities to date in California that we've been able to successfully conclude negotiations, and I see no reason whatsoever why we can't successfully complete negotiations here in Thousand Oaks. You know, it's that spirit of cooperation and collaboration that's going to help us build this state-of-the-art network and give Thousand Oaks this advanced technology. Last slide, please. In closing, let me circle back to a question that I answered earlier, which is why fiber and why now? Well, just think of the Verizon customer, the citizen of Thousand Oaks of the future. That person today is in high school or probably in college. On a college campus, he or she is networking at 100 megabits per second. That's the norm on many of our campuses here in California for whatever the student's doing, such as researching a term paper, uploading slides or photographs, downloading music from iTunes, playing games, interacting socially. They have this technology at their fingertips when they're at their college campuses. Those are our customers of the future. Customers who love the idea of being able to choose amongst thousands of movie titles on demand when they want it, who want all kinds of diverse and multicultural entertainment, who aren't intimidated at all by 400 channels, who want that crystal clear quality and that three-dimensional view of high-definition television. And chances are those types of demands and those types of things that consumers want are only going to increase over time. That's why we're revolutionizing our network with fiber to the premise. We know that Thousand Oaks is an advanced city. They want the technology of the future. They want the jobs of the future to be located here in Thousand Oaks. And approving this fiber to the premise project will certainly indicate that Thousand Oaks is a city looking to the future. And we do want to have Thousand Oaks be amongst our first cities to receive this exciting technology. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity to bring fiber to the premise to Thousand Oaks, to have a cable TV franchise with the city of Thousand Oaks, and I look forward to working with the city on this and to answer any questions that you have for me this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCallion. Any questions of the speaker? Mrs. Bill De La Pena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. McCallion, I was wondering, there are various areas in Thousand Oaks which don't even have DSL yet, and yet we're moving on, or you plan to move on to the next level. Is it, why move on to the next level, for example, if there will be areas, there are areas that don't have DSL, and there will be areas that may actually never get FTTP?
That's an excellent question, and it's one of the reasons why we are upgrading our network with fiber to the premise. The network that we have today is a very capable network that was built and has been in place for many, many years in order to provide high-quality voice service. The network we have today wasn't built, the residential network we have today wasn't built as a data network. So when broadband became available, in essence, we put equipment on top of our copper network in order to be able to provide DSL broadband service. But what we ran into, because in essence of a law of physics, is that there's only a certain distance in which you can push a broadband signal over copper cable. That basically is about 18,000 feet from our central offices, and we have the three that I mentioned earlier, Newbury Park, Conejo, and Thousand Oaks. If areas are outside that 18,000-foot range from where our switching centers are, it's very difficult for us to provide DSL service. We have somewhat augmented the network. In some neighborhoods, we've actually put in some boxes with DSL equipment out in the neighborhood, and we have fed that with fiber optic cable so we can get DSL out to more and more customers. But there just are technical limitations with the network that we have in place today. We will not have those technical limitations with fiber to the premise, because in essence with fiber to the premise, instead of putting electricity over copper cables and sending signals that way, we will be sending light through glass fiber optic cable, and the capability just is much greater.
So as you stand here tonight, you can guarantee that every household in Thousand Oaks who wishes to have FTTP will receive it?
No, I can't guarantee that every household in Thousand Oaks will get fiber to the premise. First off, we are deploying the network in the parts of the community that is served by Verizon as a telephone company. There is a small percentage of the city, I believe less than 5%, that is served by AT&T. Now, I'm not an expert on AT&T's plans in the future, but they have announced that they also are putting in a video system. It uses a different technology than what Verizon is utilizing, but they also have plans to upgrade a significant portion of their network to provide video services.
By my question, I meant Verizon customers only. That the Verizon customers won't have that guarantee, is what you're saying, correct?
No, our intention is to upgrade the entirety of the network, assuming we can do it on a cost-effective basis, and I think I made that clear in my presentation, but it's our plan to upgrade our network to fiber to the premise. And just by the nature of it, when we go down a street, the fiber is going by every single home on that street. We will build out one wire center at a time, in essence, starting again with the Newberry Park and the Conejo wire centers, and then ultimately getting to the Thousand Oaks wire center.
The next question I have regards customer service. There will be longer response times, as we were informed tonight, anywhere up to 5 to 6 days was a guess. Is that your guess, or what is your estimate?
Well, let me comment. I don't really think it's appropriate for me to be negotiating a video franchise here from the dais. There are give and takes in that process. But there is a recognition that this is a new technology. We are coming in, and when we start into the marketplace, we will have 0 customers. And we hope to be extremely successful when we open the marketplace up, but there will be an initial growth period where we may have, hopefully we will have thousands of customers in Thousand Oaks wanting to get our new services from us. So we may have initial periods of time where we aren't providing as fast responses as we will as we get the system deployed. So in our negotiation process, we want to be able to account for that. But I think the very best arbiter of service quality is the consumer. Yeah, we will start this business when we enter into the video business and when we make this new network offering with 0 customers for the service. So we will have to convince customers that we have an overall better value, whether it's price, whether it's the high-definition features we have, whether it's the internet speed. We will have to have a better value equation than what our competitors have in order for them to switch. Part of that value equation is obviously going to be how quickly we can hook their service up, how quickly we can restore their service if they have any problems. So ultimately, I don't think it should be any type of a franchise agreement that is the ultimate arbiter of service. It's going to be the consumers and the residents of Thousand Oaks.
That is also precisely my point. When the customer obviously will make that decision, but since no local office will exist and you will use a Dell computer model, does it mean that if a customer does have a problem, they will speak to someone in this country, in another country? How will that work?
Well, we give our customers a variety of options to give us service complaints. They can call us. They can contact us on the internet. We constantly monitor our network, and we fix matter of fact, we fix most of the problems before the customers know that they have even occurred. So that will continue as we move into the future.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I have some.
Mr. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. McKeelan, how are you today?
Good evening.
Good. My questions are going to center around the restoration of the residential streets, essentially the slurry seal issue. And I think I've had some conversation with representatives from Verizon in the past. I happened to be around back in 96 and somewhere in that area when GTE did their trenching, and was the recipient of literally hundreds of phone calls from residents expecting the street to be restored to its original state. Unfortunately, we were not able to reach that type of agreement with GTE when they did their construction. But now, in retrospect, I, for one, kind of learned from our mistake. And as I look through the information provided by staff, I see that there's some tentative agreement, if you will, with respect to that Verizon will provide a slurry seal unless the city is going to do a project in, I guess, somewhere in the 3-year period where the construction takes place. Is that your understanding?
Not precisely.
Okay. Tell me what you understand.
First off, I understand that the staff position on the slurry sealing is if we do trenching. Using our current construction techniques, not construction techniques of a decade ago, we actually, where there's underground facilities, mostly use boring. And there were some pictures that were shown by staff earlier of what that encompasses, I believe taken from Camarillo. And so we won't be, like during that construction project, going down and trenching all the way down a city street. Instead, what we'll do is we will open up a hole at the end of a street, and then we will use boring equipment to, in essence, bore horizontally under the street and to put conduit in place. And then we will pull the fiber optic cable through that conduit. Now, some streets may take several openings in order to complete that boring process for a number of reasons. First off, streets aren't flat, so that as we bore down the street, if the street is on a downhill slope, our bore will basically come out or rise up to the surface. So we will have to, based upon the grade of the street, bore for a period of time, then put another hole in and bore forward so that we can stay below the surface in the process. In addition to that, in the interest of full disclosure, if we have concerns about where other utilities are buried in the street, because we will have them marked from the water company and from the gas company and from the power company, we do oftentimes have to put relatively small test holes in the street where we actually make a small opening. Probably the ones I've seen have been no longer larger than this desktop, matter of fact, quite about half the size of this desktop, so that we can locate water pipes or gas pipes or whatever that are underneath the ground. And then we go back and we blacktop and seal those. But in those instances, we will not be slurry sealing the street. If we did, the actual cost of the project would be cost prohibitive. We haven't been able to do that in any of the 30 communities we've already built in California because, again, we need to be able to do this in a manner that we can provide high-value, good-quality service to our customers. And part of that is being able to build this modern network at a reasonable cost.
I understand that. As I look at the pages or the photographs from Camarillo, while there's not trenching, I see a number of, as I think, and I appreciate that full disclosure aspect, there's a number of patch, for lack of a better description, repairs on a given street. And would it be fair to say that would there be some limit with respect to how many patches there might be in an average residential street, if there is such an animal?
It really varies on a street-by-street basis, again, based upon a number of factors, which is the location of the utilities in the street, the grade of the particular street. If the street is long and flat, there's a very minimal number of openings that we have to make in the street, and if the other utilities that are in place are well-defined. But as we've been in other communities, we've run into instances, even where we've had, for example, water pipes that were very well marked out ahead of time. We found out that the markings weren't necessarily that reliable. So we needed to have our contractors periodically put smaller openings in the street, because we certainly didn't want to bore through water pipes. Unfortunately, things like that do happen in a construction project, but we try and minimize that as much as we possibly can.
Okay, let me go back to our discussion to make sure we have some clarity. What's your understanding of Verizon's requirement to slurry seal streets, if there is any?
My understanding of the requirement to slurry seal the streets, and I was listening very intently, I thought, to the presentation tonight, is if we trench a street, which we're trying not to do with this construction process, but if we put a trench all the way up and down the street, we will have to repair that trench, and we will have to do curb-to-curb slurry seal. It was also my understanding, however, if we made these openings in the street that I described, we would be, and by the way, openings that you can see all the way up and down Thousand Oaks Boulevard today, but if we made the openings in the street and we resurfaced the openings that we made in the street, ground it so that there wasn't a bump as you went over it, we would not be required to slurry seal those streets.
Okay. I got to tell you, in looking at the pictures, that I think the council is going to get a lot of complaints. And we've just spent a significant portion of capital money going back and slurry sealing all our residential streets. I think staff report talks about 40%, but which was a very popular program because, and I have to admit, it caught me by surprise when we got all those complaints. But there was a lot of folks that are very, very serious about their street being in a like new condition. And I have to tell you that I think the city is going to receive, going through this again, whether it's spots, boring, trenching, whatever it is, if the street complexion changes dramatically, and I think that it will, the city's going to be receiving a lot of complaints. Now, I don't think there's any question with respect to the value of your product, so to speak. I think clearly that's why you're here in Thousand Oaks. It's something that our residents are going to, I think, utilize a lot. I'm hoping that maybe we can reach some common ground with respect to the aesthetic impact that providing this service, which I'm assuming will be a profit for your company, balanced with the infrastructure damage, if you will, that, at least cosmetically, that in order to put this service in will be done to the residential streets. You open any discussion on that?
Absolutely. My staff and I will continue to work with city staff on the issues, but to be very clear, we want to work out the aesthetic issues with the city of Thousand Oaks. But again, if the requirement would be that we would slurry seal any street that we cut into, not only do I think that would be unfair because other people who conduct projects in the city don't have that requirement, but in addition to that, it would be cost prohibitive for us to go forward with the project. There is a bit of a trade-off when a community like Thousand Oaks has mostly underground facilities. I mean, the easiest communities for us to upgrade are communities where they have lots of telephone poles and electric poles, and the facilities are in the air. So life would be much simpler, and we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion if we were like some other communities in Southern California where most of the facilities were aerial. But I guess at the end of the day, there really isn't a free lunch. That is, if we want to upgrade those facilities that are below ground, there will be some inconvenience that is associated with that. And I think that's why it was very important for me to come to talk to City Council this evening. And if we are unwilling to live with a bit of inconvenience, and we certainly want to work with city to minimize that, but if we're unwilling to live with a bit of inconvenience, the price we'll pay as residents is having outdated infrastructure, and I don't think any of us want that.
I couldn't agree more, and I just want to clarify, I think while the inconvenience aspect is the construction piece of this, in terms of whatever disruption would be on the streets in relation to the construction that's occurring. I think the aesthetics aspect of residential streets when the construction is done, I can just tell you from experience, as much information as we get out, the expectation of most residents will be that the street is going to be repaired and look like new. And particularly looking at the pictures that you or staff provided from Camarillo. While it's not a trench going in the middle of the street, we're going to be getting calls from particularly those folks that have these repairs in front of their home. When everything's said and done, the staff is going to be getting calls, when are you guys going to come back and fix the street? That's how it goes. Well, we're not going to. What do you mean you're not going to? My street's got patches all over it. It was perfect before you see, that's the discussion that goes in. And while I understand, I think we should be able to reach some common ground with respect to what makes sense, because if the city's going to come in and do work in some period of time afterwards, well, yeah, then I think there's some common ground there. But I do think that at this point in time, at least from my perspective, we need to do a little more work with respect to the value to the city, the value to Verizon, and what our streets are going to look like when everything's said and done, because this is a great program, and Thousand Oaks is a great community to have this. But I have to say that I think I got to kind of stand up for the residential areas of the city where this work is likely going to occur, and I think we need to strike the best deal that makes sense for everybody. So if we're able to do that, and I don't know the fashion that we would, I don't even know if this perspective is shared by the majority of the council, but again, I want to emphasize this isn't really about the value of the program. I think it's great. It's no doubt about it, and our folks are going to love it. It's really about what do the streets look like when we're done.
I understand, and again, we will continue to be willing to work with city staff on this. But so you understand, we are right now finalizing the communities that we are going to continue to build in 2006 and 2007. I would like to have Thousand Oaks on that list of communities. I would also comment that, you know, a great invention would be if somebody could make asphalt that would exactly match the color of the faded asphalt that's already in the street. Then I think we would have a lot less complaints. And people do complain. I've seen it in my own neighborhood when you know, if there's sidewalk that's taken out and sidewalk is replaced, the new concrete is whiter than the faded concrete that's been there for a period of time, and it stands out, and sometimes people don't like that.
And I just have to emphasize, I'm not sure that other communities experience the level of concern or the level of frustration like Thousand Oaks, because I can tell you, Mr. Nelson isn't here anymore, but some of the staff that were here can tell you it was a very, very big deal. Arguably one of the top 5 things that I think we've dealt with since I've been on the council in terms of residents having complaints with respect to the condition of the streets. And really what it was is unmet expectations. People they were happy with the construction, happy with the service, but they had an expectation that the street was going to be basically repaired like new, and in fact the city went back and did that. That's the other piece of this. We did go back and slurry seal essentially all the residential streets. I think it took us 4 years. I don't think we should have to do that again. And I know the phone calls are going to occur, so I think we need to find some common ground there.
Okay. And I don't want to leave you with any unrealistic expectations, and I tried to make that very clear in my presentation that this is a construction process. We very much want to work to minimize disruption, but I cannot stand here tonight and tell you that you won't have some complaints. I can tell you that our construction techniques have evolved very significantly, and we won't be doing the amount of trenching. And by the way, one of the issues that we used to hear about when somebody new came in and provide additional facilities was the green pedestals that were in the front yard, you know, in front of every house or every other house, and we now use flush-mounted facilities, which other utilities have begun to do also in Thousand Oaks.
Okay, I'll let you up. Thanks.
Mr. Kelly, let me ask Mark. Mark, just a question. If you look at the Verizon service area that would be impacted by the fiber to the premise, let's say number of households, okay, or miles of street, whatever you use to quantify the amount, the scope of the project. If that's 100%, what percent of that, or do we know this yet, is in the newer areas of Dos Vientos, Lang Ranch, Rancho Canal, areas that already has the conduit in place that will not be touched at all, plus the section of the community that will go overhead? Those two areas would not be impacted at all. What percentage does that represent of the total?
The short answer is we don't know. We have not yet received from Verizon a complete proposal.
I think we really need to know that because I recall too the emotion of that, and it's primarily the person that doesn't want the service. This is an extremely enlightened community, and the opportunity for the Verizon customers to have this, my sense is that they're going to move very rapidly to have it. But in the negotiations, I really think that that's a question that we need to know. And once we know that, then we need to concentrate, okay, what would the preparation program be to respond to those types of concerns? Then the next breakdown would be which of those areas are on our list for slurry seal or overlay. And that would be another element in this equation, so that we can start dealing at least with percentages and some numbers and know the scope of the issue. And I'm sure that will come out in this negotiation. But from my perspective, and having gone through the GTE Americast issue in the community, and knowing, you're absolutely right, the sensitivity and the emotion of it and what have you, but the value of this service is so significant in my mind that it outweighs the concern and complaint, which is fixable. And so I think we need to get our arms around really scope, and that will be in the negotiations one of the things that I would look forward to, that we can bring it down and we can actually quantify and say, well, of the 100% of the system, this is the percent we're dealing with, and then we could develop some sort of a mutually acceptable response and mitigation program to address those concerns. But the final thing, absolute full disclosure. There is no free lunch. There will be something, but here's how we intend to respond to it. So, additional questions or comments, Mrs. Bildale, opinion.
Thank you. I do have one more question, and that deals with the length of the term. Could you please state why you prefer a 15-year versus a 10-year?
I can't at this point in time. That's the term that we've been negotiating with. We're making a very significant investment. We wanted some certainty that we would have a franchise for a period of time and understand the economic terms under which we are making this investment.
Thank you.
Okay, additional.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm going to.
Oh, I just wanted to comment on one of the things, not to put words in Verizon's mouth, but
no, I'm looking at the council to see if there are any more questions or comments from the council, and there was a request for comment from the city attorney,
Sorry.
Mrs. Albano.
Thank you. On the 15 years, where I was going to say is that it is a standard model to, when you're looking at investments and recouping investments, that 15 years is a standard business model that people use, and it's not surprising that Verizon would be looking at that model.
Thank you. The reason I was asking the question was because we've been through a lot the last couple of years with Adelphia, and I wanted to make sure, and the main problem with that was, of course, customer service. That's the reason why I wanted to find out exactly why 15 versus 10.
It's kind of interesting from my perspective that I think, with the exception of Southern California Edison, the oldest utility serving this community is Verizon. It came before the water companies, and it came before a lot of the other utilities. And the relationship that the community has had with Verizon and its predecessors has, for the most part, been very, very positive. It's unfortunate that we've had some experiences with the Adelphias and with Cal American Water. And I know that those are on everyone's minds. But that was then, and that was them. So I want to make sure that that issue was touched on, but now it's been touched on. So any additional comments, questions from staff? Anyone? Mr. McKellian, thank you so very much for giving your time, taking it, come down and help us with this thing, because it's, as you know, and now we know, it's a big deal. And it's an opportunity, and now we need to have a little discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mitnick, do you want to try and pull this thing together now for us? We've been at this for about an hour, and I'd like to wrap it up.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd be glad to do that. In essence, staff is seeking council confirmation with respect to 2 or 3 recommendations, but before I reiterate those, I do want to acknowledge one thing first, and that is the outstanding relationship the city's had with John Dawkin. It was indicated earlier that he is retiring, and John is a longtime resident of Thousand Oaks. One of the advantages to having these great corporations headquartered in Thousand Oaks is their key decision makers often live here. And John, in the role of External Affairs Director, has been accessible, helpful, and we've agreed to disagree a lot on a lot of issues. But he's also very involved with the Chamber, so I hope I'm not straying too much here, but I just wanted to point that out and thank John publicly for your assistance and support over the years. This issue that's before the council, it's complicated, although the benefits are potentially significant. The city does want Verizon to succeed, not just as a corporate citizen, but also with respect to the technology being contemplated. Competition is a good thing, and if it works as envisioned, it will be helpful with respect to cable television, the service that Adelphia is providing, as well as offering another alternative to satellite TV. We haven't talked about that at all. And then there's also potential this wireless technology that's floating around out there, and potentially other technologies that we can't even envision today. So that's all good. The downside, though, that we have, we talked about some of the service issues, the impacts on the integrity of the city's residential infrastructure, but there's also the potential negative impact on city revenues. There's a lot of uncertainty. We do realize about $1.5 million a year in the general fund from franchise fees on Adelphia at this point in time. So we are concerned about that, and right, we should be concerned about that, because we use that money to provide vital services to the community. And hopefully competition will be a good thing, and there'll be more customers, and the franchise fees go up. The implications of AB 2987, uncertain at this point in time. There's also uncertainty with respect to customer service. And while we're hopeful that the glass is half full, it's our obligation, council, to point out to you that there might be some downsides. We hope that that's not going to be the case. So again, it's a balancing act, and as indicated, this is a high-quality city with high expectations. We provide outstanding customer service to our residents, and their expectations are very high, so we have to balance that. We're also concerned about potential unintended consequences and what those impacts will be to the council and to our general fund. 10 years ago, the unintended consequence, I think Councilmember Fox mentioned, the city stepping up and reslurring streets, that was over $1 million to the general fund. So we're sensitive to that potential impact. And we're also sensitive to the impacts, repeating of history here, and I'm sorry for going on, but it's important. AB 2987 does have, is reminiscent to those of us who have been in the business a long time, of the deregulation of the electrical industry 10 years ago, and all the unintended consequences that created, the unintended consequences of ERAF, Prop 218, the VLF cuts, and the weakening of redevelopment agencies. That this has all been going on at the state level. I just have to point that out because there is the totality of that with the unintended impacts on the city. But having said all that, we do want to work cooperatively with Verizon. There is an extensive public relations effort that needs to be done on behalf of the company as well as the city to get the word out to those communities that or those neighborhoods that will likely be impacted. So those are some comments on that. The action items, well, not really action items, but what staff is seeking council confirmation is the following. One, if Verizon uses the trenchless construction, then the slurry seal would not be required. If Verizon uses the open cut trenching construction, then we would have to come to terms on how to deal with the slurry issue. And then with respect to the franchise agreement, the recommendation is to confirm the direction that staff is pursuing with Verizon to complete negotiations, hold a public hearing in these chambers on September 12th, and we would do the proper notices to make that happen. So with that, staff's available for questions.
All right. Does somebody want to formulate a motion? Anyone? Mr. Fox?
First, for the city attorney, my understanding is just a verbal report. So
it's receive and file, but they want reinforcement. Staff wants reinforcement for direction.
I'm sorry, the agenda stated confirmation of direction to staff direction. It was not received, even though it's verbal, the agenda as agendized did allow confirmation of staff direction. It did clearly say it dealt with encroachment issues as well as franchise issues, and that's what we're seeking from council tonight.
Okay. With that being said, I think Mr. Mitnick hit on the two salient points here. First, with respect to the franchise fees and monies that the city takes in, I think staff needs to look at that. And that's more of a long-term issue because there's some unanswered questions there. So that needs to be looked at, and I think some hard numbers need to be brought back to the council. So we're looking at exactly what the potential is there. And then the second issue is the aesthetic issue of the streets. Again, I want to emphasize, from my perspective, I think most residents will endure the inconvenience of the construction along their street. Well, they don't like it, they understand it. It's the aesthetic condition of the street when all the construction's done that will cause the majority of the phone calls. I think Mr. Gillette asked a very good question, and that's information that I think we need to make an informed decision on whether we're going to do this or we're not going to do it. And that is, we need to know the scope of this. 10 years ago, it seemed pretty big to me, okay, because we got a lot of calls and they came from all over the city. I think with the newer developments that we have in Dos Vientos, Lang Ranch, and some of the other areas, we need to know where we're not going to have issues because there's already infrastructure that will allow for Verizon to make these installations without really, doing anything to the street. So scope, I think, is important. That being said, I, for one, think we need to negotiate, find some more common ground with Verizon with respect to, in those areas that we are unable to use existing conduit, that there's some balance with respect to putting the streets back to their original condition. Because while I can appreciate our folks are sophisticated, they want it, they also are very concerned about property values. They're very concerned about the condition of their neighborhoods. And we're going to be back here, I guarantee it, when all's said and done. If we don't reconcile this one way or another, we're going to be back here fielding complaints and dealing with this in some other fashion. Because I don't think our residents are going to stand by and sit tight for, you're going to have to wait 3 years to get your street fixed. That's my perspective. So that would be my direction to staff is sit down with Verizon, come up with a little bit tighter timelines with respect to how the streets get repaired and who's responsible. I'm thinking more along the lines of 1 year. I think people will tolerate a year of their street looking patchy, but any longer than that, they're not going to be satisfied. And the question will be, why didn't the city make them do this? Because that was the question 10 years ago. So that's my perspective. I'm not going to throw a motion out there because there may be different different ideas. So that's.
Okay, down on this end, Mrs. Irwin.
Yeah, you didn't hear the very beginning discussion. Actually, some of the streets would not be slurry coated for up to 9 years. So, and what they're saying also is that for the first 3 years, they wouldn't be required to do anything, only if there were trenches. So, I think what I would really like to see is what the average is, like how many streets are, with this plan, how many streets are going to be patchy and for how long?
Yeah, so I'm clear
right now.
Just so we're clear where I'm coming from, I would look at a maximum of a year before something happens to that street if the patchwork goes in. And independent of the trenching, whether it's patching, boring, whatever it might be, looking at the pictures, I think where I'm coming from is a year. Certainly 9 years is unacceptable, completely unacceptable. I think 3 years is unacceptable. So I'm looking at the 1 year range where the city's going to do a project, then Verizon's off the hook. If the city's not going to do a project, Verizon needs to come back and slurry the streets. That's my starting point, but I'm not going to, I think these issues are up for negotiation. So that's hard and fast.
Ms. Bildale, opinion? I'm sorry, are you through, Ms. Irwin? Okay, Ms. Bildale, opinion?
Thank you. I did want to point out that the policy that staff was looking to confirm is actually no slurry seal at all if Verizon uses the trenchless construction, which would still produce patches. And I think that is where the 9 year number came from. We would have to wait until the next city slurry sealing. What I'm also concerned about is, aside from the cosmetic, is customer service. I understand that with customer service, negotiations are somewhat restricted, but what Thousand Oaks customers had to endure during a competitor's or a different company's problems certainly should not be repeated. And I would like for staff to make sure that customer service would be held to a level that would be acceptable to the residents of Thousand Oaks.
Dr. Glancy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm more inclined to agree with Mr. Fox in terms of disruption of the streets and time of repair. In terms of the customer service, I have to think that Verizon offers something to the customer, fully knowing, with the customers fully knowing, that there could be interruption in service. It could be a slow time of response. The standards being somewhat nebulous for the first period of time, 6 months or whatever the number is. So my feeling is that the customer is going to be dealing with something of a known product. And if they sign on the dotted line, my assumption is they're willing to accept those inconveniences. I think the disruption of the streets, though, is something else. And so in that regard, I'd agree with Mr. Fox.
Thank you. Mrs. Irwin?
I just had a question for Mr. Mitnick. Is it, in your negotiations with Verizon, have they basically stated that they're unwilling to do any slurry coat at all for trenchless construction?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we want to make sure we're not going to negotiate in public, but I want to point out what makes this difficult to answer these questions in a straightforward manner is we don't have a comprehensive plan in front of us. We could not answer the mayor's question about what percentage of the streets will be disrupted and when. So it's sort of hypothetical for us to speculate. I can't answer that question. I can't say that they've said no, they won't do it.
They have hesitation and reservation about having to slurry the entire street for every neighborhood they go into, whether it's trenchless or involving the construction of trenches. These are issues we're going to have to work out in negotiation and our discussions with them. And once we get more concrete plans and to understand the totality of the whole thing, it's really difficult for us to answer these type of questions. I know Mr. Watkins wants to elaborate on that or add to it.
I can just maybe add just a little bit to it. Part of the reason we don't have comprehensive plans is that, as Mr. McCallion mentioned, they have 3 different call centers, and so their planning unit per se is these call centers, whereas we have the incorporated boundaries of the city, and those call centers and our incorporated boundaries aren't all co-located. So they haven't planned out the entire city, which is why we don't have anything to respond to as far as a comprehensive plan or comprehensive scope of work yet. So that makes it difficult. I will say that this project is very unique, and so it's difficult to compare it to others. The only one we can really compare it to is when the cable system went in. Typically, when a tract is constructed, all the utilities are constructed with that tract. So the homes have all the utilities to them. It's very uncommon for an entirely new infrastructure backbone to go in where you've got a main line and services. It's not common to have that happen. We do that every now and then. We're doing, I think just earlier this evening, City Council awarded a water line project where we're replacing some undersized water lines. So we'll go in and put a water line down, and we'll put new services to every home. And in that case, we would then, when we're done, slurry the entire street because you've got a longitudinal and transverse crossings. But it's very uncommon to put in a whole new system like that. Typically, those are put in when the track is constructed. And then from that point on, it's minor repairs here and there. And so it is a unique project, and it will have a big impact. And that is why it makes it kind of difficult to answer some of the questions or to say with certainty exactly what those impacts will be.
Any further questions? Okay, I think the time has come. Let me see if my sense is that the consensus of the council is that this service, fiber to the premises, is something that the council would truly like to see available to the Verizon customers in the city of Thousand Oaks, for all of the reasons stated. That being the case, there are some things that we just don't know yet. So the direction would be to direct the city manager to continue negotiations with Verizon. We've expressed the sensitivities to the street coverage, the final status of the street issue, and we've addressed the service component, response component, which are things that have to come out when more information is known and at a later stage in negotiation. If that's the case, then staff is directed to continue its negotiation with Verizon in a timely manner, keeping those 2 major issues. If there are any others, you get a chance to chime in, but that would be the motion. The direction to staff to continue, that this city council does encourage working as diligently as possible with Verizon to reach the common ground necessary to come up with a mutually acceptable response, which we will get somewhere the first part or mid-September, and that look creatively at being a true partner in this thing. Because of the cost issues involved, and being as flexible as reasonably possible, with the ultimate goal to see if we can reasonably bring in this project working with Verizon to provide this service to the Verizon customers in the city of Thousand Oaks. Mr. Fox, that's the motion.
Okay, I'm certainly going to support that motion with this caveat. It's been addressed, but I think we need to put it on the record. Unless there's some kind of proprietary reason, I think staff, as part of the discussions, has to see a plan of anticipated coverage by Verizon. We're flying in the dark here. We absolutely need to see that so we can make a intelligent review and evaluation of exactly where the streets are, what the potential in terms of number of residents we're dealing with. And then I think the city, and by the way, I think that's in Verizon's interest as well, because we clearly see the value of this product coming into our community. And if it's something that we can find some common ground, I'll tell you up front, I think that, if there is value, and the city has clearly demonstrated they're willing to put some money into this, but by the same token, I think if we can just have an honest discussion about coverage and anticipated at least areas that you think it will likely be working in, then we can make some intelligent decisions. So that would be part of, Mr. Mayor, if that would be, if you're willing, that would be part of the motion with respect to providing staff some clear direction.
As far as my understanding, that was part and parcel of the motion.
Okay, very good.
Absolutely. Okay. And also, I want to clarify, the direction from the council is that the city manager, this is of such significance, the city manager is the responsible point of interface for negotiation with the complete participation of the city attorney's office and the public works director. That the resources of this city, whatever resources are necessary, will be brought in on this, and brought in on as timely a manner as possible. There is an issue of time here. We just authorized the modification to an overlay project again tonight to one of the neighborhoods that will be significantly impacted by this, and we need to know how does that work with relationship to putting this in. And we also, all of the questions we've asked about the large amount of area that's covered by overhead, where there will be no trenching at all, and the areas in the city that's covered with the existing trench because of new development. So I think I'm comfortable that is everybody else comfortable with that? Okay, that'll be the motion. Any final comments? None? Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. McCallion and the staff from Verizon. Thank you so very much for coming down this evening. Really appreciate the information. And John, we are sorely going to miss your smiling representative face of Verizon. But we know you're not going very far away, so we'll get a chance to talk more about that in the future. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, we have a request. Guys, I know you've been sitting patiently, but it had to be tremendously interesting. Okay, well, I know it would. You guys are interested in your community. So I'm going to, about a 12-minute, I'll try a 12-minute recess to 8:45. Thank you. Anticipated. Item 9B, Youth Master Plan Implementation Update, Phase 4 Implementation, Year 3. Mina Leba, Senior Analyst, Eric Hong, Youth Commissioner. Mina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. We have members of the City of Thousand Oaks Youth Commission here tonight. They served as facilitators to the city's Youth Master Plan project. We are currently in the fourth phase, and the final phase, which is implementation of the Youth Master Plan. Tonight, they're here to share with you some of their accomplishments for the year. And tonight, we'd like to start off with Eric Wong. He's a Thousand Oaks High School graduate bound for UCLA.
Thank you, Mina. I have no speaker cards on any of these people, so you'll do the introductions for us then?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank
fine.
you.
Thank you. Eric, please.
Council members, my name is Eric Wong, and I am a recent graduate of Thousand Oaks High School and the chairperson of the Youth Master Plan Committee for the 2005-2006 term. My fellow Youth Commission facilitators and I are here to update you on the committee's accomplishments this past year in our mission to implement the city's Youth Master Plan. I'd also like to introduce you to one of our student volunteers, Austin Plummer, who will be helping with my presentation. The goal of the project was to make Thousand Oaks a more youth-friendly community. As you may recall, during the last 5 years, we administered a survey and conducted focus groups with middle school and high school teens to determine youth needs in the community, analyzed the results and compiled them into a plan, and devised 4 general recommendations. We developed 21 individual strategies based on these recommendations into actual programs. And during this final phase, or implementation, we selected strategies each year to put to action. Here to share with you our accomplishments as contained in your staff report are fellow youth commissioners Nadia Ahankub and Fraser Phillips.
Mayor, honorable council members, my name is Fraser Phillips, and I am the outgoing chair of the Thousand Oaks Youth Commission and a recent graduate of Thousand Oaks High School as well. The Thousand Oaks Youth Master Plan Committee helped facilitate the creation of the Conejo Coalition for Youth and Families, also that's our Strategy 3, and the coalition's purpose is to work collectively to engage and support activities with youth, parents, and community organizations to strengthen Thousand Oaks youth and families. The Youth Commission sends 2 representatives to the monthly meetings to ensure that teens have an active voice in the coalition's planning efforts. Thus far, an annual parenting fair and teen job strategies seminars have been coordinated. This year, the Thousand Oaks Youth Master Plan Committee and the Youth Commission as well hosted a 2nd annual Youth Summit, and that was our 5th strategy, Strategy 5. And the Youth Summit is a caucus of area middle school and high school teens to learn of current needs and interests. These interests are summarized in an annual State of the Youth report, which should be included there, as well as the interests. We also include consumer interests, and those are provided in an annual letter to the Chamber of Commerce. And this year, the summit included a segment for the Oaks Mall. Participants of Youth Master Plan Committee, let me clarify there, yeah, the Thousand Oaks Mall is a participant of the Youth Master Plan Committee, and the purpose of that was to learn about what teens would like to see during the impending mall expansion. So Strategy 9 is directed to the committee to create physical access points for teens to learn of opportunities and activities in the community. Although we researched the feasibility of installing bulletin boards and fixtures at the teen center and libraries, one of the major concerns was the physical upkeep and maintenance. And with the advent of the information superhighway, which we've heard so much about this evening, and teen use of the internet, the committee decided on a different method of meeting the strategy. So one of our biggest accomplishments this year was designing and researching links to create the city's first teen website, and we chose a name for it. It's the Thousand Oaks Teen Scene, or TO Teen Scene. And some of the components that will be included in this website include a teen calendar, links to the teen center, the school district, and the schools, the youth commission, social service agencies, public transportation and driving, job tips and opportunities, recreation and entertainment, as well as homework help and local tutors. So next up we have Nadia. Take it away.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nadia Honku, and I'm an upcoming senior at Lorena High School. As part of Strategy 10, we discovered during the 2001 Youth Master Plan survey, teens noted that overall they rely on their parents for assistance with social or human service type issues. Parent resources list of web links was developed for inclusion in the city's teen website to support parents in their efforts. Teens also advised us that they're always in search of volunteer service and internships to gain more experience and to prep their college resumes. As part of Strategy 20, the Youth Master Plan Committee included a listing of volunteer organizations and internship opportunities in the TO teen scene. They are categorized as follows: animals, arts, charities and collections, libraries, political groups, tutoring, environment, health, homeless, needy, public safety, museums, seniors, teen organizations, and seasonal events. Although college information and scholarships was not a part of the original strategies, the committee decided to include web links on this subject to further enhance the TO teen scene and support their peers. Links to college advice, college and universities, technical institutes, college standardized exams, and financial aid was collected. Moreover, hundreds of scholarships links related to arts, community service, minorities, writing, special education, science, scholarship banks, and even scholarships sponsored by local business and organizations such as the Rotary were assembled for the website.
Thank you.
As part of Strategy 11, we work with representatives from the Ventura County Star and Thousand Oaks Acorn to find ways for local press to increase awareness of teen activities and events. Both the Star and Acorn were amenable to assisting teens and youth organizations to publicize their activities. The problem was that many of these organizations did not know how to write or submit a press release. With the help of high school editors, the committee developed a teen press release template. This template can be accessed on the city's teen website and outlines the data needed and instructions for submission. In addition to these web-related strategies, we were pleased to coordinate a special meeting with Graham Watts, Public Works Manager, who is helping us fulfill Strategy 15, or to increase awareness and accessibility of public transportation. Mr. Watts took the feedback received from this meeting to provide to the marketing consultant to bolster teen awareness and ridership of TO transit. By this fall, with the help of the City IT Division, the youth website should be up and running. In addition, under the auspices of the Community and Cultural Services Department, the Youth Master Plan will determine which strategies they will implement. There are only 5 strategies left for full implementation of the Master Plan. Thank you, council members, for being so supportive of the city's youth through programs like the Youth Commission and Youth Master Plan. If the City Council has any questions at this time, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so very much. Any questions? Mrs. Bill de la Pena?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. And again, congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you.
You prove that you are completely dedicated to serving your community and also to educate and inform fellow teenagers as well, and you're to be commended for that. In going through the report and the Youth Master Plan report, I was noticing, and this is just a question, about links provided to political parties, and I only see one political party, and I was wondering whether there is a reason for that. Because I'm sure that there are links for, in Thousand Oaks for more than just one.
I didn't know of that, and we'll be sure to add the other political parties on after.
Council member, I believe that was also because they were, many of these students, and there are 30 in total, half of them are on vacation now on this committee, were researching and making calls to these organizations and asking for some feedback and information. So these web listings are still kind of a work in progress, and so as we hear back from these organizations, or if there's anyone that's watching that would like to be included as part of this TO teen scene, please call us at the city manager's office, and we'll be sure to include those links.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you again. Any addition, Mrs. Irwin?
I also want to commend you for a job well done. I think the website's going to be an excellent resource. Just had one question, and that is, who is keeping the website updated? Is it the city IT department, or are some of the students that are on the committee doing it?
We're hoping that once the website gets up and running, well, that's our first goal, just to get it up and running. And all the information we have thus far it's not very it doesn't need to be updated every week or so, but for events such as the calendar of events or stuff like that, instead of having someone to constantly update the events, we're hoping to be able to link our calendar to the calendars of organizations that we have found through our research and development of the content of the website.
Very good, and congratulations again to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other end? Okay, again, thank you all so very much. Now, who's done? You're done. And you're on your way where?
UCLA.
You're going to UCLA, and you're going?
UC Berkeley.
You're going to Berkeley. Oh, that's wonderful. And you're going to Lorena. To the top of the land. And what's your next year again? T.O. High. All right, go Lancers. All right. Thank you so very, very much for everything you have done. Congratulations on what you're going to be doing. We'll look forward, those of you staying, we'll look forward to work in progress for the continuing year. Going on to college, congratulations and all the very best wishes from all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mina, thank you very much. Item 9C, proposed refunding, restructuring Jan's Marketplace Community Facilities District. Candace Hong, Finance Director, and I do have a card on this item.
Mayor Gillette and council members, over 12 years ago, the City Council approved creation of the Jan's Marketplace Community District and the issuance of $30 million in special tax bonds. Owners of the then Jan's Mall petitioned the city to establish the district. The special tax bonds were used to construct the parking structure and other public improvements. These public improvements are part of the 190,000 square foot expansion and redevelopment of the shopping center. Recently, representatives of the owners of the Jan's Marketplace came to the City of Thousand Oaks requesting the city explore refinancing the existing bonds that were sold in 1994. Preliminary calculations show that by extending the term of the debt by 12 years, the annual debt service could be reduced. Owners of the Jan's Marketplace will bear the entire cost of city staff time. Consultants, including the financial advisor, underwriter, bond counsel, and disclosure counsel, the appraiser, and the special tax consultant that are all needed to go through this process. The Jan's Marketplace will be required to place an upfront deposit with the city of Thousand Oaks. At a future council meeting, the recommended funding restructuring will be reviewed by the City Council, and the City Council would authorize the issuance of any refunding bonds and approved documents at that time. So we're asking three things tonight: to authorize the staff to review options for refunding, restructuring the bonds issued on behalf of the Jan's Marketplace Community Facilities District, authorize the city manager to enter into a deposit agreement with Newmark Merrill Companies, who represents the owner of the Jan's Marketplace, and three, authorize the city manager to retain financial advisor, underwriter, bond counsel, disclosure counsel, appraiser, and special tax consultant. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Hahn. Questions? Questions? There are no questions. All right, I have a card. Mr. Nick Kidwai? Mr. Nick Kidwai? Let's see, this is item 9C. Yes, Mr. going for the third time, Mr. Nick Kidwai. Mr. Kidwai must have left. Okay. Okay, pleasure of the council. Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the staff recommendation for items 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. Comments to the motion? Being none, please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 9D. Resolution to support Ventura County Civic Alliance. Steve DeGeorge, Associate Planner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt a resolution in support of the joint Ventura County Civic Alliance Ventura Council of Governments proposal, Compact for a Sustainable Ventura County, to the Southern California Association of Governments. As many of you know, the VCCA is a coalition of civic leaders working to address regional issues. And working together with VCOG, they've developed a joint planning proposal to submit to SCAG under SCAG's Compass 2% program. The VCCA VCOG project proposes to look at issues facing Ventura County and develop a regional vision for the future and the tools to implement that vision. While the VCCA VCOG proposal consists of 3 distinct phases, data collection, consensus building, and implementation, only the first phase, data collection, is being submitted to SCAG for funding. The VCCA is proposing to update the regional inventory of vacant parcels, housing, population, and services. The data that effort will collect will be of great use countywide and can provide a solid foundation for future regional discussions. Adopting a resolution of support doesn't obligate the city to funding or even to staff participation, but does highlight the city's support for regional initiatives and will help the VCCA and VCOG obtain SCAG funding. For the reasons indicated, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt the attached resolution in support of the Ventura County Civic Alliance Ventura Council of Governments Compact for Sustainable Ventura County, proposal to the Southern California Association of Governments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff? There are none. One quick question. How long has this is the Ventura County Community Foundation Civic Alliance project, right?
That's correct.
Started about 5-6 years ago?
That's correct.
Okay, it's kind of interesting because when the Community Foundation first started this project, they were absolutely adamant that they wanted no government involvement. And I remember one of their very first presentations when I was on the, I don't know, whatever I was on, something of, and a number of us that held elected office questioned that, but they wanted to do that without any public office holder involvement and what have you. Is this now just an evolutionary part of this total process that now, because I was at something, I attended something today for the Community Foundation as part of this offshoot, this one happened to be on affordable housing, where they were reaching out to local government for their participation. Can you enlighten me on that?
I don't want to speak for the VCCA, but it does seem to be an evolutionary process that they're going through, and both in terms of support from the community or for support from the region and for funding. Both seem to be necessary to them to actually accomplish the work they want to do.
Okay. Any additional comments of staff? I have no cards on this item. Pleasure of the council. Mr. Fox.
I would move the staff recommendation, council adopt the attached resolution. Resolution to support Ventura County Civic Alliance.
Thank you. Comments to the motion? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. DeGeorge. Item 9E, Townhouse Development Proposal. Jeff Spencer, Senior Planner. Mr. Spencer.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. We're here tonight to consider a proposal for a townhouse development on Hillcrest Drive for up to 18 housing units, with 4 of those units being moderate income units, or either the units would be provided or an in lieu payment would be made. And these particular units would be proposed on 2686 Hillcrest Drive and an adjacent parcel 2736 Hillcrest Drive. And the other item that we're here to consider, it's related, is to decide whether to remove or modify an existing deed restriction on one of those 2 parcels, 2686 Hillcrest, that requires all of the housing on that property to be affordable to moderate income households. One of the parcels, 2686 Hillcrest, is a little under an acre, and 2736 is about 0.85 gross acres. So altogether, it's under 2 acres in size. This is an aerial view of the properties. You can see that 2686 Hillcrest is vacant, and there are actually 2 homes on the adjacent parcel. As a matter of background, these properties were the subject in 1992 of a general plan amendment that changed the land use element designation from low-density residential to medium-density residential. Medium-density residential is equivalent density of 4.5 to 15 units per acre. And the change occurred on both these 2 properties we're talking about tonight, 2686 and 2736 Hillcrest. And this general plan map shows this green color indicates the medium density residential on the 2 properties, and it's surrounded by low density residential. Back in 1992, the council introduced an ordinance to change the 2686 and 2736 from rural exclusive to residential plan development, 7 units per acre, single-family detached. But the final adoption, second reading, was deferred pending recordation of the deed restriction, the 100% moderate income housing deed restriction that I mentioned earlier. The owner of one of the properties, 2686, did record a deed restriction, but the owner of the adjacent parcel did not. And so the council adopted the zone change for the property with the deed restriction only. And that's reflected on this zoning map. You can see the RPD 7 units per acre, single family detached is just the one parcel, 2686. Many years later, back in March, the applicant applied to revert the property 2686 to the original general plan and the original zoning in exchange for removing the deed restriction. And the reason for the request is, and he indicated in his application, he submitted a pro forma showing that it's not feasible to build 100% moderate income housing. A little bit later, back in May, the applicant offered to retain the general plan and zoning and provide 1 moderate income unit or an in lieu payment of $200,000. In June of this year, the council considered the request by the applicant whether to initiate an amendment to the general plan, zoning, and deed restriction, but the council directed staff to explore options, including retaining the general plan, the medium density general plan, and explore possibilities for higher density development and land banking, and working with our nonprofit affordable housing providers to perhaps build an affordable project in partnership with the city. So I'll go over some of those options, including the options that the council asked staff to explore. One of them is development at higher density. And this would involve retaining the general plan, medium density residential, initiating a change of zone to residential plan development, 15 units per net acre for both of the parcels. Secondly, it would allow an 18-unit townhome development and modify the deed restriction to provide 4 moderate income units or in lieu payments of $250,000 per unit, and that would net for the 4 $1 million. This is just a conceptual plan. that was submitted by the applicant, hasn't undergone a detailed review, but this is a type of townhome proposal that would be possible. This particular design provides 17 units. This is another possible design with 17 units. And this is another conceptual design for 18 townhouse units. A second option that we explored was the possibility of land banking, and we looked at the option of developing approximately 30 lower income units in cooperation with one of our nonprofit affordable housing developers. And this would require a change of zone to residential plan development, 15 units per net acre, and then working with a partnership with one of the nonprofits. But this would require substantial financial assistance from the city in order to make the project feasible. Option 3 is to develop 4 or 5 single-family detached homes with 1 affordable unit or an in-lieu payment. This requires no change to the general plan or zoning for 2686 Hillcrest. It would require a modification to the deed restriction to require 20% moderate income housing or a payment in lieu of. And this was the recommendation that staff made at the June 13th City Council meeting. This is an illustration of what the project might look like if it involved actually the 2 parcels. Although we're really talking here about on the illustration, the parcel to the right. But it ultimately will allow for development of 10 units on the 2 parcels. Option 4 involves reverting to the general plan that existed back in 1992, and that would allow for the development of 3 single-family detached homes. And it would require changing back to the original low-density residential general plan for 2686 Hillcrest, removing entirely the deed restriction for moderate income housing. The downside here is this would provide no affordable housing at all. And this is an illustration of that option. There'd be 3 lots, most likely looking something like this on the 2686 Hillcrest property. As far as the adjacent parcels, something like that could occur as well. Option 5 is take no action at all, and that would just leave the deed restriction in place, requiring 4 moderate income single-family units. There would be no change to the general plan or the zoning. There would be no change to the deed restriction. And as indicated in the staff report, staff believes that it's not economically feasible to develop the property under this option, and therefore, even though there's a deed restriction, staff believes no affordable housing would be created. And this is an illustration of development of that parcel at 2686 with 4 single-family units. This is a design that had been approved a number of years ago and has since expired. There is some possibility that 5 units could be created as well. So given all those 5 options, it's staff's recommendation that the council not initiate a general plan amendment and thereby retain the medium density general plan designation. It's also staff's recommendation that the council initiate a change of zone to RPD 15 units per net acre on both of the parcels we're discussing tonight, and refer the change of zone to the Planning Commission for a hearing and recommendation. As far as the deed restriction, staff recommends that the council agree to consider modifying the restriction if both parcels are developed at a minimum density of 12 units per net acre, and requiring 4 of the units to be affordable to moderate income households, and allow in lieu payments of $250,000 per unit, subject to building cost index increases. And then finally, the council will allow concurrent processing of entitlement applications with that change of zone, should the applicant desire to do so. And that concludes staff's presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant and the owner of the adjacent parcel are here tonight in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions of staff? Ms. Spildale-Lapena?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Spector. I was wondering about the minimum density of 12 units per acre. It is estimated that that will net approximately up to 18 units.
It sort of depends on how much land is used in the access roadway for the project. It could be, depending on the design, it could be as much as 18, yes. And if it was probably a rental project, they could even get more than 12 per acre.
And even with potentially 18 units, it is still not feasible to include 4 affordable units?
No, the applicant has submitted a pro forma and believing that it's feasible to provide 4 or the in lieu payments at those densities.
No, I mean for the units to be actually built without an in lieu payment.
Yes, yes.
So it would be. Thank you.
Additional questions of staff? I have 2 cards. One is the applicant, Mr. Steve Grinold, and if you'd like to come down at this time as the applicant. City clerk, time allotted for applicant?
This isn't a public hearing, so 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, Mr. Grinold, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Steve Grinold. I am both the applicant and a resident of Thousand Oaks. I'm very pleased to present to you this wonderful opportunity for the city to create affordable housing or $1 million fee in lieu of, and also be creating 18 or more units that could be sold at very reasonable prices. The proposed 4 units affordable out of 18 units is a greater than 20% ratio, and the in lieu fee of $250,000 each is substantially higher than the $200,000 fee per unit that's been agreed to on other projects. All of this can be accomplished without a general plan amendment, but I do need a modification of the current deed restriction, and that can only come from you, the City Council. If I am unsuccessful in getting your approval this evening, I will no longer be able to proceed with the purchase of the adjacent property, and my neighbor's indicated that he's going to go ahead and build 3 custom homes on his site. That would also eliminate the ability to put a cul-de-sac in, and then my property would only be able to net 4 or 5 properties, 4 or 5 units in the future. The other plan that was in my presentation to you for the 10 single-family detached homes, those homes are in the 2,000 square foot range on about 6,000 foot lots, and I was only presenting that as an alternative plan in case there was strong opposition to the zoning which would be needed to build the proposed attached units. I was hoping to have that as a fallback plan, with the $500,000 fee being paid in lieu of affordable, or create 2 affordable homes. Even if this plan was, as an alternative, would be better than having 3 larger, more expensive custom homes on one side and probably nothing ever built on my site. I also wanted to add that in my proposal that was presented to you, I was showing a $200,000 a unit fee in lieu of, and that has since been increased to $250,000 per unit. And thank you for allowing me to present this, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the applicant? Thank you very much, Mr. Greenland. Thank you. Additional speaker, Mr. Nick Kidwai. Mr. Kidwai.
Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park and Director of Concerned Citizens, Thousand Oaks. Honorable Mayor, City Council. First of all, if I might say so, I don't know when this council will get its act together and provide some bigger monitors so that you can watch the PowerPoint presentations. I mean, nowadays 50-inch plasma TVs are everywhere, and you have bigger TVs even, but I watched part of the hearing in the lobby, which was easier to see, but this place is really not conducive for the citizens. In fact, it is so disappointing, and I hope somebody will take you to the cleaners, that an applicant who has such a big investment is only allowed to speak for 3 minutes on a technicality. But earlier on, we had a Verizon president speak for 15 minutes. I mean, this is completely against your rules. But then, even the grand jury is not able to catch you guys. I do have a question. I know the council will ignore me, but I read the report during the Verizon presentation, and it raises a lot of interesting questions. And one of the questions that has not been asked is why and when. I know it was early on, but more details as to why the project was the only one of this kind to be zoned for low and moderate income. That is a question. Maybe I'm not framing it correctly, but it is unique in that. And why was this parcel, in the unique wisdom of the city, done that way? I also want to ask a bigger question as to what is the so-called slow growth movement in this city. Does it mean that you build 2 homes on these 2 lots and then you are a champion of slow growth because you don't get 18 units? I mean, where does this, we have an election coming up and this will again be the topic. And even in the debates among the candidates, you never get to the real meat of the questions. This thing of, I mean, the Beatles song that you can't buy me love, I mean, this thing of buying low-income housing by taking developer funds is just ridiculous. And the interesting thing is that these homes, most of these homes are 2,000 square feet, I mean, in the plans, 1 and 2. And my home and many homes in this city are 1,600 square feet. That's the kind of homes that were built in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. But then they want to build 2,000, 3,000 homes and then give 1 unit for density bonus. I have many people in my corporate office or people living in North Carolina that are buying homes for 150,000, 1-acre lots. But it's not the cost of the land here. The cost of the land is $2.1 million. The soft costs are $3.6 million. Another question, what are the deferred development funds? $1.25 million. That's what it said. I mean, 3 minutes is really not adequate to address these issues.
Okay. Pleasure of the council. Fox?
In looking at the options that staff prepared, it seems to me that if we're interested in any real affordable component, that option number 1 seems to be the only component that makes sense. We are looking at a dwindling inventory for opportunities for affordability. And so if we're interested in doing that, which is I think part of our discussion, that option 1 seemed to make a lot of sense. So that's my perspective on that.
Thank you. Mrs. Irwin?
I want to commend the staff. You came back very quickly and really did show us all the different options for this parcel. I think option 1 does look like the best option. I would not be interested in lieu of fees if we go in that direction. I would like to see the units be built, and I've had this discussion with staff today, if we go in this direction, I think we really need to look at local preference for the moderate, and even if there's any way to look at local preference for the market rate. That has been the council direction, that we would like to provide housing for our police and teachers and nurses, and I don't want this opportunity to go by without doing everything we can to get Thousand Oaks residents in these units. So that would be my comment for now.
Do you want to direct that question then to Mr. Prescott as far as feasibility of imposition of that kind of condition, or?
Yes, Mr. Prescott.
And he can refer it back to the city attorney, and then we...
So moved.
Mrs. Albano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The council directed us at the end of the affordable housing workshop we had that we would look at some preference ability, and we'd bring that back. And when we did our follow-up memo, I believe we said we would bring it back in about a 6-month time frame, which would be in the fall. That still is our intent, to bring something forward. I can only caution the council that it probably will not be as specific as you would like it to be, because there are a lot of constraints legally about doing preferences, and there's risk associated with all of them. So that's my one caution. I think if you were to move forward with this process and you did not want to have the in lieu as an option, you could take that off the table tonight. You could leave it on the table and see what happens as we progress. But I can tell you that we will come back with the preference information way in advance of this ever proceeding to a point where something would actually get built. So I can assure the council that your decision on the preference will be in place that could affect this project if that's the direction, because this project would have to go through concurrent processing for zone changes, and all of that will take a great deal of time. So you won't be behind the curve on this one. We will be ahead of it in terms of before, and we can look at the idea of working with the applicant to ensure the kind of preference that we can put in place and that he can legally do. And there's ways to do marketing and other ideas that I'm sure the applicant has been very open working with the city so far, and we would hope that that relationship will continue. And the only suggestion I have is that you don't, I mean, if the council's preference, majority of you tonight, is to remove the in lieu, so be it, but you can give us the direction to really pursue something else, because by the time this may be built, that may be an option that you might want to have back on the table. I'm just saying you've got the time frame, John, to do this is probably at least a year, do you think, to go through this whole process, or less?
Well, I think the process of going through the entitlement application and the and the legislative action, the zone change, even if the applicant moves quickly, could take up to a year. And then you've got the what I call the precise planning and construction phase, which could be another year or so.
Hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does, and I understand that there's all sorts of legal issues with it, but I think we should really try and push the envelope here. And then I had a question, I guess it would probably be for Mr. Prescott also. If we do in lieu fees, generally, I know we leverage that money, but it does go generally to area housing or many mansions, and that's used for very low income, correct?
It would be a mix of very low income and low income primarily with those two agencies.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mitnick, do you have something to enlighten us with?
Just a clarification, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If there is an in lieu fee payment, it would go into the Housing Trust Fund that council established at the last study session. And then the council would be free to determine how that money would be spent, if it would go toward many mansions or a housing authority or some other group, or for a city project.
Okay. Ms. Spilden, opinion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This project did remind me of an earlier project that we discussed at the beginning of the year. I believe it was in March, the Villa Hilltop, where we also had several units that were supposed to be affordable, and we actually, the council voted to allow the developer to pay an in lieu fee to instead of building the homes. I did not like that recommendation then because I felt that we missed 7 opportunities to provide housing for families such as what Councilmember Irwin mentioned, affordable housing to nurses, firefighters, other families, workforce families. And I do feel the same about this particular project. I will not and cannot agree to an in lieu payment in this case simply because we need to provide housing now. We can't put it into a fund and then wait a few years and then begin to build units. The pressure to provide affordable housing is immediate and it is urgent. And therefore, I would be able to go with the first option. I would be able to agree to that, but definitely not opt for the in lieu payment. And the reason I would do that, even though the density is somewhat higher, is because originally 4 affordable units were envisioned in that particular area, and we will still retain 4 affordable units if we go with option 1. So whatever motion is made tonight, I would hope that it includes option 1 without the in lieu payment fee. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Dr. Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, support option 1. I'm a little ambivalent as to the value of the in lieu payment. I do see value in being able to leverage money to greater advantage. I also see disadvantage in, or some pitfalls in getting into for sale affordables in managing them, particularly in light of the article in the paper this week with Ventura County, or Ventura, City of Ventura, and the pitfalls they've run into with their affordable housing, with non-residents buying some of the units, people buying the units and putting them on the rental market, and it really is a morass of problem. But regardless, I would be more inclined to go with option 1 and after the word units, say or possibly in lieu payments, leaving the option open.
Additional comments? Okay, someone, Mrs. Irwin.
I'm going to make the motion that we take the staff recommendation number 1 to allow up to 18 housing units, and I am going to say 4 moderate income units and not include the in lieu payments.
Okay, did you, from what you said before, did you want to include that it is your preference and include it in the motion for preference, vocational preference?
It's my very strong desire to have the city attorney find some way that we can legally have all the units, the market rate and the moderate income units, be local preference.
Local and vocational preference?
Specifically vocational preference and local preference.
Okay, I mean, you can include that in the motion, right?
Yes, it's included now.
We'll see where it goes. Absolutely. Okay, it's in there. Comments to the motion? Dr. Clancy.
Thank you. While it doesn't include in lieu, the motion does include the element of preference, and I'm very much in favor of that. So I'll certainly yield on the in lieu in favor of that, so I'll support.
Additional comments to the motion? There being none, maker of the motion, Mrs. Irwin, any additional comment? No? Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Item 10, Development Agency reports, Redevelopment Agency reports, none. Committee, Commission, Board reports, Council on Aging appointments, 11A. Council members Irwin and Glancy, which one of you would like to? Dr. Glancy, you want to take that? You have your hand up. 11.
You know, only because I'm listening. I'm sorry. Last Friday, Ms. Irwin and I had the opportunity to interview 12 very, very outstanding seniors for the Council on Aging appointments. There were only 5 appointments that were available. I was extremely impressed with what these people brought to the table and the talents and interest that they showed to the cause, and so I thought we came up with 5 very worthy people, and I would urge support of recommending these nominations.
Thank you. That's the motion. Comments to the motion? Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 12, follow-up reports, meetings, conferences, and council members, none. Excuse me. Item 13, general utilities, golf course, theaters, and redevelopment agency demands. The motion is, and the motion and the recommendation to approve demands of July 25th, 2006, approve demands of August 1st, 2006, August 8th, 2006, August 15th, 2006, August 22nd, 2006, August 29th, 2006, and September 5th, 2006, subject to review, and I think the next word should be ratification. Review and ratification. The extension of approvals, obviously pending review and ratification, is because of the August recess of the council. That's the motion. Comments to the motion? Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item 14, city manager. Mr. Mitnick.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, by way of follow-up from requests of members of the public, at the beginning of the meeting, we heard from a resident who expressed concern and perhaps frustration with respect to gaining access to the Code of Ethics on the city's website. It is obtainable via the city website by going into the municipal code section. A copy of the Code of Ethics and other pertinent documents was provided to that individual. However, if that individual or any members of the public experience problems with the city's website to get documents like this, since it involves the city clerk's office, I encourage you to call Linda Lawrence.
Is that Nancy Linda Lawrence?
Yeah. Linda Lawrence at 449-2166, and she'll help you through that. Another resident had questions about the grand jury report on the city council that was discussed at the last meeting. The question, and I'll turn it over to Amy Albano in a second, but the district attorney did respond and to the question of potential or alleged Brown Act violations, so that issue was dealt with. With respect to who prosecutes alleged violations of the city's municipal code, I'll turn that over to Amy.
Thank you, City Manager, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. Just briefly, the city attorney is charged with prosecuting violations of the city municipal code. The whole issue of how a city attorney prosecutes possibly a sitting council member has come up, not possibly in this city, but in other cities, in the city that I formerly was employed in Ventura, because it really comes up a lot in the election area. And what is typically done is when there is a belief that there is a probable cause or reasonable cause to believe that a violation of a municipal code has occurred by a member of a sitting council member, is to refer that matter to an outside counsel to look at it. One option is to go to the district attorney, and in those cases they're not always available, and you would pay their cost to actually investigate it. The other is to hire a private firm, and I do have the names of private firms that would be available to do that if that was ever necessary. But there is mechanisms in place to deal with that issue. It may not be always the best situation, but a similar issue happened in Mountain View, and there wasn't a prosecution in an entire case that was done. There's also the option possibly of even the Attorney General. But it's not that our municipal code, that it wouldn't be enforced. So thank you.
Okay, continue.
Legislative issues?
Okay. One other item to follow up on quickly. A resident asked a question about the size of the monitor, or expressed concern about the size of the monitors in the council chambers, and actually staff is aware of that, and we're, as part of the upcoming capital improvement program budgeting process, we're looking at addressing that issue, as well as the how we do presentations, potentially a monitor off on the side. So that resident did hit on something that we are looking at, but it'll be several months before the council and members of the public see any changes in the chamber. So that's it by way of follow-up on items from the raised during the agenda. By way of announcements and upcoming issues, the Southern California is in the middle of an extreme heat wave right now, and Edison has gone through stage 1 and stage 2 alerts, and we heard Rudy Gonzalez talk a little bit about that earlier. In response to identifying how residents of Thousand Oaks may be impacted, especially members of the seniors, the senior members of the community, we've gone through, we did some analysis earlier today, and a memo has been prepared. We'll share it with the full council and get the word out to the public. But the city has designated the Global Senior Center as a cooling center. So in the event that we need to provide a location for seniors or any other members of the public to go to seek relief from the heat, that is one potential facility, and we'll work with the Park District and other governmental agencies and private companies in the city to identify these. We will put this on the city's website tomorrow, so I'm making the council aware of that issue, and we'll share this memo with the council shortly. Also,
Excuse me, Mr. Mitnick, would that, if developing this program, would that include transportation, the availability of some form of public transportation to get them from wherever they're domiciled or wherever they identify this need to the Global Center?
Yeah, I don't know the exact answer, but we will look into that and report back on that. But we will get information as quickly as we can on the city's website.
Thank you.
That takes care of that issue. At the end of last week, the draft environmental impact report, this document here, was submitted for the proposed Oaks Mall renovation project. And again, if the members of the public go to our website, you will find information about this EIR, and you can also come into City Hall and obtain a copy. I'm not sure if a copy is going to be available on the website. It's rather thick, but we have plenty of different avenues for members of the public to use to get a copy. The comment period runs through September 2nd, 2006, and again, more information is available on the city's website. And the City Council's ad hoc committee dealing with this issue will meet on August 14th to get an update on this project. This is the last council meeting for the month of July. There will be no council meeting in August as the council will be in recess. The next council meeting will be on September 12th, and there are 3 public hearings worth pointing out at this point in time. The first one deals with water and wastewater connection charges. Those are adjusted every year due to the inflation. And as we mentioned earlier tonight, the proposed Verizon cable franchise agreement, there'll be a public hearing for that. And then there will be a public hearing dealing with the appeal by Centex for the proposed housing project at Bintu Park Road and Romana Drive. And also we hope during department reports to have the contract for the golf course operator before the council. So that's it by way of staff follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions of the city manager? Dr. Glancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Mitnick, we talked yesterday or day before about one of the mobile home parks having been without power for 22 hours, and my asking you if there was some inclusion in our emergency plan to accommodate some of those senior citizens that are somewhat incapacitated, get them some kind of relief, ensure that they've got whatever they need, and that we don't have a lot of deaths due to the heat. Did that come up in conversation at all, or is there any progress on it?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, to answer that question, yes, we did talk about it today with the department heads. And I think I put something in council mail today. The American Red Cross has a mechanism to help out, and I have to confess, we have a lot of education to go through to understand how this process works, because we speculate the management of these facilities has a phone tree and contact information to get a hold of family members if there's a need to, for example, prolonged power outage. We're going to work with American Red Cross to understand their role. We're going to work with Senior Concerns to understand their role in the Park District and other nonprofit agencies. But it's a learning curve for us. But we do understand the American Red Cross will be there if need be right away.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mrs. Bildale, can you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering whether you could let us know, the public know, whether the City of Thousand Oaks is taking any steps to also help conserve energy while we are experiencing stages 1 and 2 alerts.
Excellent question. Sorry, I forgot to comment on that. Yes, we're practicing conservation here at the City Hall and our other facilities. And as a reminder, the Hill Canyon Wastewater Treatment Plant is an interruptible customer, and they've had to utilize their backup generators to keep things going. And what we typically do here is we communicate with all the employees when we go into the stage 1 alert, which happened the other day, to encourage employees to conserve, including the frequency of using printers, faxes, copy machines. The thermostats the temperature goes up. And we're really doing our part out at the Central Library because they've been without air conditioning for a couple weeks through the reconstruction of the roof project out there. Accidental, but we're saving energy that way. So we're doing what we can, and we're cooperating fully with Edison.
Okay. Any additional questions, City Manager? No. Item 15, we have a closed session. I'll ask Mrs. City Attorney, Mrs. Albano, to call the closed session, and then we will adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The council will be convening into closed session. The first item is conference with real property negotiator, property acquisition, Mount Cleve Ridge Properties, assessor parcel number 521-0011-365-375-385-395. City negotiators Amy Albano and Mark Town. Owners MS Dubin, DA Lund, the Hulls, the Browns. Negotiators for property owners is Christopher Rue and Chuck Cohen. Under negotiation, price in terms of sale pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. Conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. One case, Altamira versus Molmont, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subsection A, and there will not be anything that needs to be reported out at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Albano. At this time, we will adjourn to the regular meeting, September 12th, 2006, City Council in summer recess for the month of August. Thank you all very much.